So this is the article in question, is it?
And with that, we are into episode number 20 here of the Alley Plays August Takeover featuring the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. And here today, you guys, we might be finishing up the first of 2 games here in the Chronicles. Great Ace Attorney Adventures here is what we've been working through. We are on case number 5, Trial Part 4, and McGilded's small box just did arrive here to the courtroom from Mr. Winnebank's pawnbrokery. So I'm assuming we're going to inspect this. Curious as to what this box actually is. I was theorizing at the end of our other episode yesterday, episode number 19, that perhaps it's a secret tiny music box, since we seem to have been having difficulty discovering what type of music box plays that particular disc. I know Herlock had ordered somehow one of every single type of music box present in the European continent, and is waiting for those arrived. He was going to test it himself, but of course, with that caramel copy of the disc, that he was able to press it and make a copy of all the discs' bumps and things like that. But I'm curious as to what we're going to find here. Is this going to be a regular box with something crazy inside? Is it a music player? I don't know, but let's jump on into it. So excited. Hopefully, we figure out what's going on here with this trial.
The small box deposited with the pawnbroker by Mr. McGilded 2 months ago.
And on the night of Mr. Winnebank's murder, the only item on the shelves that was touched by whoever broke into the shop. Quick, let's open it and see what's inside. That looks like a music box to me.
Good gracious, this is no ordinary box, it seems.
Wow. Although, in truth, I had an inkling that might be the case. It would appear that the box houses a miniature music box movement.
Then, is it too much to expect?
I think it would be reasonable to assume that it is a device for the playback of this disc, my lord.
So, here we have the means to play back Mr. McGilded's disc, deposited at Winnebank's at much the same time.
Not strictly correct, my lord. It was not McGilded's disc. It was the disc of his victim in the omnibus.
But why, for heaven's sake? Are we to understand that the brickmaker was trying to sell this music box disc to Mr. McGilded?
I believe the answer will become clear if we listen to the music on the disc, my lord.
Yes, very well. Let the court now listen to this curious disc at last.
Hold it! Wait, my lord!
Good grief, what is the meaning of this, Inspector?
The music box and the disc are, well, they're unrelated to the case. No need to spoil the somber atmosphere in the courtroom with some silly bit of music.
Objection!
This disc may very well have motivated the culprit in this case to commit murder. Clearly, there's every chance that it's fundamentally important to understanding what happened. The prosecution has no objection. But no! The piece of evidence is police property now! You can't... Clearly, Scotland Yard has some vested interest here. But it is policy of this prosecutor to leave no avenues unexplored. And you, Inspector, have no jurisdiction here to prevent that from happening. Ah!
No further delays, please. Play the disc.
Uh-oh. Yo, the lady on the jury must be tripping out right now.
What on earth? That's certainly not what I would call music.
No. It's just the same note playing over and over again in a regular sequence.
Mr. Graydon. This
really is priceless. After all that, the music box is broken. Broken? It can't be, can it? Well, obviously. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the officer sent to fetch it didn't drop it on the way back to the courtroom.
Well, with much regret, I feel the court must accept that this music box offers little in way of clues.
I think that was in Morse Code. I don't know. I'm saying that lady on the jury is probably tripping out right now.
Are you ready to move on, counsel?
Come on. Yes, all right. It does sound as though it's completely broken, but is it? Could this music emanating from the music box possibly be a new clue? Yeah, duh. Duh. And I believe that it could be relevant, my lord.
Good lord, but how can it be? It's an abomination, counsel, mere noise. I failed to see how it can have any meaning whatsoever.
It does sound strange, I agree. But there's one thing bothering me. While Graydon stands there chortling victoriously, the inspector beside him has a rather telling expression on his face. It's as if Gregson recognizes the sound, as if he's familiar with it somehow. And that's making him appear extremely on edge.
And if that's the stats of the defense, my Nipponese friend, answer me this.
Oh?
Just what relevance do you propose this woeful chiming has on this case?
It's the defense's belief that the sound emanating from this music box is not supposed to be music. Just because this is a music box doesn't necessarily mean the sounds we're hearing are music. Look at that! The smile vanished from Graydon's lips as soon as I said it. I'm on the right lines here. I must be. He making deductions based on how people react to what you say. You're acting just like Hurley, Rudo.
Objection!
The sounds we're hearing aren't necessarily music. Well, now that you've told us what they are not, I'm sure the court would like to hear what they are. Do enlighten us, my Nipponese friend.
Well,
surely you have an idea in mind, because if not, it will be the death of your ill-formed argument.
Exactly. The music box is clearly broken. Refusing to accept that fact is pure foolishness. They've got me. I don't know what the answer is yet. Bruno? I've just examined the music box very thoroughly. And I'm fairly certain that it's not broken at all. Really? Really? The way it's been made, it can only produce a single note anyway. Thank you, Iris. Alright, well, if the music box isn't broken, it must mean that the sound it's producing has some significance that isn't musical. Ah, could it be? Is that what these sounds are? Something just struck me, Runo. And I feel like I recently, in the past few hours even, I've heard another sound very much like this one the music box makes. Yeah, the lady on the jury. Yes, it's a familiar sound. Actually, Iris, I was just thinking exactly the same thing.
I'm going to have to press the defense for an answer. If your assertion is that the sound produced by this music box is not in fact music at all, then what the devil is it, counsel?
All the evidence we've seen so far, all the testimony we've heard, it's all pointing to one single answer now.
The prosecution demands that my learned Nipponese friend presents proof now. Tangible proof of this latest wild speculation.
All right then. This could be the best chance I'm going to get to fight back in this trial. And if I'm right, it's going to join all the dots together. The evidence that explains the true nature of the sounds on this music box disc is...
Take that!
Today's paper, counsel. This headline is Pawnbroker perishes in pickpocket plunder. Highly supportive of your case.
No, my lord. I was hoping you'd look a little further down the page.
Further down. Ministry mole. Classified secrets may have been leaked overseas from Ministry of Justice. Yes, this is a very serious matter, being investigated at the highest level, I understand.
I have heard that international transmissions along supposedly secure lines are somehow being intercepted and leaked to various other countries. And presumably, those transmissions are the form of wired telegrams? Of course. Juror number 5, your input, please. Stop. Oh! Me, sir? Whatever's the matter? You told the court before that you worked at the same communication station as Mr. Graydon, did you not? Yes, that's correct. And the particular station where you work deals with government communications and newspaper reports? Oh, yes. We're not your run-of-the-mill communication station at all. Our work is extremely important. Then tell me, is this not a very familiar sound? You don't mean to say, is it? That's right, madam. It bears more than a passing resemblance to the sound made by your telegraph machine as you tap it. I believe it's called Morse Code. But I don't believe it! Now correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to leaking telegrams from government departments, there could be nobody more perfectly placed than a highly skilled communications officer. Are you suggesting that the music box disc contains stolen government secrets in Morse Code?
Order, please everyone, order. But this is high treason, counsel, deserving of capital punishment.
Too much new vocabulary. What is treason and what is capital punishment? The sorts of words I'd half expect you to know.
For our sovereign government's confidential information, hostile nations would surely pay almost any price.
Yes, and on that night 2 months ago, that was the very negotiation that was taking place inside the Omnibus. But in the end, Gilded perished, and the all-important disc lay unclaimed in the pawnbrokery.
My word!
In which case, whoever stole that information in the first place must surely have been beside himself with worry, because if the disc were to be discovered before it found its way out of the country,
it would reveal an act of high treason punishable by death.
So the culprit had no choice but to retrieve it, and in order to do that, he would have to gain entry to the pawnbrokery illegally in the middle of the night. Because the article left behind by Mr. McGilded would incriminate him too much if it got into the wrong hands. Isn't that right, Mr. Graydon? You think I've been stealing government secrets? Preposterous! Absolutely preposterous!
So, in response to the defense's accusation, you claim complete innocence, do you?
Well, of course I do. I've had to stand here in silence while that pretentious foreign lawyer has been prattling away.
Objection!
Then by all means, count in the charges, sir. The prosecution demands the witness testifies in response to the accusations brought by the defense. Delighted, I'm sure.
The witness is reminded that the crime under scrutiny in this trial is the murder of the pawnbroker, Mr. Winterbank. That being a most flagitious offence for which the law of this land sanctions a capital punishment. But the heinous act of high treason is no less as serious a crime. I urge you to bear that in mind as you testify, Mr. Graydon. So then, let us proceed.
Hold it!
You gotta let's have a rabbit and pork here, Governor. We got things to say.
I beg your pardon, who do you think you are?
My name's Nash Skulkin. Occupation is a professional baddie. Name's Ringo Skulkin, but we ain't baddies enough to sell out our motherland. That's right. We're what they call the Three Skulkin Brothers. Bad timing, fellas! Very bad timing! Graydon's counter. A mere communications officer couldn't possibly steal confidential government information. Besides, the sounds produced by that music box aren't even Morse code. It was some low-class brickmaker negotiating with Gilded anyway, was it not? I have no relation to the man. Look, all we've done is break into the gaff the other night like what he told us to do. If we'd known there was dodgy government secrets involved, we wouldn't have touched it.
Mr. Skulkin.
One Mr. I'll do, Governor. What's up?
Do I take it that you now admit to the crime? That on the night in question, you did indeed gain entry to the premises illegally? And moreover, you did so as a party of 3 in collaboration with Mr. Graydon here?
We did, Gov, we did.
Quietening down, please. What say you to that, Mr. Graydon?
I have no idea what these two ruffians are referring to. You little rotter getting us mixed up all in all this monkey business? You never said nothing about government secrets. Was supposed to be a straight-up job. And what about the geezer whose shop it was, eh? Poor old bloke didn't have to die, did he? Ah, nice to know who your friends are. Whatever these men say, I deny the accusations.
Indeed. Well, I certainly wasn't expecting this little music box to become so significant in the proceedings. However, as it has, I will admit it into the court record as evidence.
All right.
Hold it!
So is this newspaper headline accurate? Government communications are being intercepted? How could I possibly know? What do you mean by that? Any important government communications are handled by high-level officers, by specialists. General members of the staff in the station where I work would never be entrusted with sensitive information. Oh no, stop. Must say something, stop. Let me guess. Juror number 5. We regularly communicate station officers aren't as lowly as you've been being led to believe. Team of us are responsible for setting up and testing the telegraphs used by the ministry. Mr. Graydon is the team leader. That's fascinating. Graydon is a highly skilled operator, stop. Currently in presence of idle, stop.
So you had access to the equipment used for these confidential communications, Mr. Graydon?
Well, what of it? The transmissions are always made behind closed doors, so they can't be heard. And in any case, all messages are sent in cipher. Normal employees couldn't possibly understand them. Oh no, stop. Must say something, stop. Mr. Graydon regularly attends meeting with the ministry technicians and the ministry communications team. He assists them in ensuring that there are no errors in important international communications. And he has received top prize at the cipher cracking convention 5 years in a row now. That's fascinating. Graydon is highly skilled operator, stop. Currently in presence of idle, stop. Well, your idol would appreciate it if you'd keep your mouth shut. She should really pick her idols more carefully. I tell you, this lawyer's accusations are completely unfounded.
Hold it!
They're not. To anyone with a brain, that would be blatantly apparent on listening to that music box even for a few seconds. Good thing I ain't got no brain. I said, yo, that sounds like Morse code. Of course, of course. Surely it can't be that my learned friend is unfamiliar with Morse code. Ouch. He looks genuinely shocked at my ignorance. Ha ha ha. I would be more than happy to demonstrate the basics for you, sir. A lesson here in court? Morse code is a continuous series of 2 distinct tones. Tones, you say? Yes, a short dot and a long dash. By combining those in different ways, you construct letters. I see. For example, this is A, and this is B. But when you listen to sound produced by this music box, you only hear one tone, don't you? But it sounds so similar. The rhythm of it is the same in everything. but there's no discernible meaning to this apparently random sequence of sounds. So your assertion is fundamentally flawed. This is not Morse code. No! Ha 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 ha. Really, you shouldn't be so surprised. What did I tell you? That music box is nothing but a worthless piece of scrap. Perhaps you might consider studying your subject matter before casting aspersions in the future. Ugh, stop. Nothing to say but stop. Oh, it's so frustrating, isn't it? Iris? I mean, if the government secrets were somehow being leaked using the music box, so many other things would slot into place so nicely. Could there still be something I haven't considered? Would it really be impossible to use this music box somehow to play back Morse code? Give it a try. There's still every possibility that this music box is instrumental in the leaking of government secrets. That's the belief of the defense, at least.
Objection!
Does it please you in some way, my Nipponese friend, to repeat the same line of argument ad infinitum? It's already been established that to be Morse code, 2 tones are required, dots and dashes. Yes, I'm well aware of that. Then what?
Well, it would appear that the defense has a hypothesis to put forward. You had better present your idea at once, counsel. How do you propose that this music box, which appears to produce only a single tone, could have been used to cipher secret messages in Morse code?
How about you flip it upside down? Oh, wait, what about this little lever? Ew. This is the mechanism that turns the bumps on the disc into sound, isn't it? Yes, the movement. It's all thanks to the comb with its teeth that are plucked by the passing bumps. Usually, teeth on the comb are different lengths so that each one produces a different tone. But this comb is very strange. All the teeth are exactly the same length. Well, what does that mean? It means that no matter which tooth is plucked by the passing bumps, the music box will make the same sound. I've never seen a music box like it before. Yes, it is strange. Music box that can only play a single note. There has to be some significance in that, surely. What about the bottom? Is that a button? Oh. What is it, Runo? I've just noticed something about this music box. Looks like the bottom of it opens up as well. Ah, you're right. Well, come on then. What are you waiting for? Let's open it. All right then, here goes. How convenient. Look at that. There's another movement on the other side. So, does that mean you can set another disc to play back on this side? Yes, I think so. It looks like the 2 movements are linked together. They're linked? So if you had 2 discs, they would both play back at the same time. All right, let's present that.
Got it!
Good gracious, what am I looking at here? Another movement on the underside of the music box?
What? It appears, my lord, that the 2 movements are linked together. In other words, you can put 2 discs in this music box, and the sounds of both will play back at the same time.
Good heavens!
As the court has heard, Morse code comprises of 2 tones, a short dot, and a long dash. With a second disc in place, the music box could be used to generate Morse code and convey a message. This is beyond a joke. And I'm sorry? This is poor excuse for a lawyer who has absolutely no evidence to support his claims. Though, of course, if my lone friend were to be able to present the court with the second disc, that would be another matter. Well, I can't at the moment. And may I remind the courts that, as the witness has pointed out, he was not the one in the omnibus with Gilded 2 months ago, striking a deal over the disc or discs.
Indeed, that was Mr. Mason, the brickmaker.
Exactly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with it.
No, it has holes. I must admit the argument presented by the defense is much promised.
Yeah, I wonder if they're related. Because the brickmaker was, blonde, right? He's not here. Alright. He's not here, but
I believe the cross-examination should continue.
the link between Graded and the victim of the Omnibus Case must be there somewhere. But I haven't found it yet. Oh dear, it looks like you need to give your argument more strength, Runo.
You will reiterate your testimony if you please, Mr. Graydon.
If I must, though I maintain exactly what I did at the start of this pointless cross-examination.
Hold it!
So 2 months ago in that omnibus, Gilded killed the brickmaker and stole the disc. Mr. Mason was a single man with almost nothing to his name. Seems he lived in an artisan quarter some years ago. The people there remember little about him. That doesn't make much sense, though, does it? How would a humble brickmaker come to acquire secret government information? How indeed? There must have been somebody else involved behind the scenes in all this. Somebody who acquired the disc and gave it to Mr. Mason, in order to take it to the meeting with Gilded and negotiate a deal. Dear me. You may have it in for me, sir, but I assure you, I have far more class than that. An old brickmaker from an artisan quarter and this well-to-do communications officer. If only I could find some evidence to link the two of them together.
If you have nothing more to add on that note, let us return to the witness testimony.
I don't know if we have the evidence yet, but I'm gonna just keep pressing here.
Hold it!
Like Mr. Graydon told you to do, you mean? That's it? Yeah, who else, eh? Silly me thought he was just popping over for a natter after all them years, but the rod had a dodgy job for us. Yeah, Ash? Let me stop you there, Mr. Skulkin. After all them years, you say? Do you mean to tell me that Mr. Graydon is an acquaintance of yours? We're the sociable kind of baddies, you know. Sure, let's say Graydon's in old China.
Excuse me.
Is something wrong, Mr. Skulkin? Eh? No, the other Mr. Skulkin. What? Who, me? When your brother was testifying just now, he said something that seemed to cause you to react. Oh, I was just remembering the old days, that's all. We used to have a right old laugh together way back when. Together with Mr. Graydon, you mean? Yeah, we Ash. I mean, you look at him now, he's a fancy whistle and flute, and you wouldn't Adam and Eve it. But when he was younger, he was from the poor part of town just like us. Is that so? But he was always a leery one. He had the brains, he had the savvy. Always coming up with smart ideas like what would never have gone through our heads. God blimey, ain't that the truth? Remember Milverton and Skulkin's milk run? That was a corker, eh? Save it until after the trial. Your reminiscing has no place in this courtroom. And neither does your fruit. Oi, the geezer asked us a question, didn't he? And we was answering. Yeah, we ain't done nothing wrong.
Nevertheless, the court is not prepared to accompany you on your trip down memory lane. Counsel, can we turn our attention back to the testimony, please?
I don't know. That sentimental story be relevant somehow? Yeah, add it to the testimony. My lord.
Yes, counsel.
The brother's last sentimental statement could hold vital information relating this case.
Very well, counsel. And I will permit the brothers to supplement their testimony with that detail. Briefly, I hasten to add.
Say no more. A skulkin's never skulkin'. Milverton and Skulkin's milk run. Go. Them were the days.
Hold it!
I'm sure I'm going to regret asking, but what exactly was that? Some kind of business? Just a little scheme we had going back when we was youngsters. Bit of fun, really. delivering fresh milk to the locals, that's what it was all about. That sounds alarmingly legitimate. There must be a catch. I suppose since we're here, I should ask them to elaborate, but on what? Business model, maybe? So, how did your little business work exactly? Well, every morning down our way, the milkman would come with his cart to deliver milk, see? If you stuck your empties out for your front door, he would leave you them full again, right? So, we swooped in on the action, got people to sign up with us. We promised to deliver milk for half the price of the other geezers doing it. People couldn't wait to sign on the dotted line. We were raking it in, we were... So, did you live on a dairy farm or something? Gordon Bennett, are you off your rocker? We had nothing. We were too poor to have a farm. Right. Nah, what we had going was simple once you had the idea. We just switch them over, see? Our customers' empties with the full ones from anyone wasn't on our books. A dot alright? I think he meant to say a diddle, and that's a crime. It was just an harmless bit of fun, that's all.
Milking the general public in such a fashion is most certainly not harmless, as you put it.
Well, it was him what came up with the idea. Ash is the evil genius. You mean Mr. Graydon? Yeah, Ash always had his head in the book when we was growing up. Said he was gonna get himself an education and get out of the slum we lived in. Cool, we all ragged on him about it, didn't we? Told him he was soft in the end to even think about it. But look at him now, he's only gonna become a blinking communication officer, ain't he?
A communications officer, Mr. Skelkin.
Charles and Wilson's milk run. No, Iris, don't even think about it. All of a sudden, we seem to be up to our necks in a serious matter of national security. Although all this talk about interception of secret government messages is still just conjecture at this stage. It would explain a number of things, though, wouldn't it? The negotiation Jeannie overheard the omnibus 2 months ago and the break-in at Windibanks. But the trouble is, it wasn't Mr. Graydon in the omnibus with Mr. McGilded. No, that was Mr. Mason, the brickmaker, who was so horribly murdered. If only there was some link between the two men somehow. I know, but Mr. Graydon's testimony seems to be as watertight as ever. I wonder if the key to us making headway with the cross-examination here could be those two brothers. Let's ask about the name. Ah, no, I went too far. Circling around, circling around.
Hold it!
I'm sure I'm going to regret this, but what exactly was that? Some sort of business? Just a little scheme we had going back when we was youngsters. Bit of fun, really. Delivering fresh milk to the locals, that's what it was all about. Sounds alarmingly legitimate, but there must be a catch. So this business was just a bit of fun, you say? And it was just yourselves and Mr. Graydon involved? Yeah, that's it. Milverton and Skulkin's milk run, was it? Yeah, that's it. And where did the Milverton part come from? Oh, right. I thought Clever Clogs like you'd have... Enough of this. How much longer are we expected to listen to this drivel?
Objection.
I don't... Let me guess, you don't accept anything these two witnesses are saying? Tell me, why is it that it was only at the mention of the name Milverton that you decided to interject? Because well... You weren't the happiest of homes that one came from? Yeah, his old man was struggling for money so much his wife walked out on him. She took the name Graydon then, see? But Ash will always be Milverton to us. Milverton? So that used to be your surname, did it? Of course not. This is all bunkum. I've been a Graydon since I was born. Do you really think you can rely on the testimony of these two thieves, You are a communications officer attached to the civil service. As such, your personal details will have been thoroughly checked at the time of your appointment. It would be a very simple matter indeed to subpoena those records, Mr. Graydon.
Well, it would appear that Mr. Skulkin's testimony has been reliable, for once. You were born Ashley Milverton, then. Is that correct?
Very well, yes. So Ashley Graydon was once Ashley Milverton. That information could change things, and could turn out to be extremely important. Let's go look at Susato's file. Leaving the mouse on screen so we can pull up Susato's file momentarily. Got him! Thank you, Susato. Susato MVP. Mr. Ashley Milverton. Tell me, why did you try to hide your former name from the court? Because I haven't gone by that name for years. It means nothing to me. No, I don't think that's the real explanation at all. The truth is, you had reason to hide that name.
Explain yourself, please, counsel.
I have here the notes from the Omnibus Case, my lord. As we all know, the victim, the man who we now understand to have been negotiating with Mr. Gilded.
Yes, Mr. Mason, the brickmaker.
That's right, only Mason wasn't his surname at all. It was his given name. His full name was Mason Milverton.
Milverton? Do you mean to say Small's alive?
Mr. Ashley Milverton, is it not the case that the brickmaker, Mr. Mason Milverton, was your father? I don't. As I believe I mentioned earlier, your family history will have been thoroughly checked when you join the civil service. And it really would take no time at all for the court to subpoena those records. The truth is, you've been illegally acquiring highly confidential government information and selling it on to Mr. McGilded in collaboration with your father. The new facts and evidence unveiled by the cross-examination of this witness all come together to reveal the truth. The truth, you say? Now you collaborated with your father, Mr. Mason Milverton, in illegal dealings with Magnus McGilded.
By dint of this music box, you mean, counsel?
Yes, stealing information being sent in by secret government communications and selling it on to McGilded. Mr. Graydon concocted this elaborate scheme of using 2 music box discs to encode the information, as presumably a safety measure against the information falling into the wrong hands.
And a very effective one. I shouldn't have given the scheme any credence whatsoever.
But the deal with McGilded went sour, and the brickmaker met his end. Yes, but before he was arrested, McGilded managed to temporarily dispose of the stolen disc at the pawnbroker. Then, having learnt of the situation, you appeared at Windibanks 2 days ago in an attempt to recover 2 articles McGilded had placed in pawn there. But that attempt failed. One of the discs was seized by the police, and the other you never found. So that same night, you enlisted the help of the Skulkin brothers and broke into the pawnbrokery. This time, determined to recover the second disc.
Are you suggesting that the second disc was inside the music box?
Eh? We never knew nothing about that. On the night that Mr. Windibank was killed. the intruder to the pawnbroker touched one item and one item alone, the music box.
That's rather ingeniously demonstrated using the 2 prints from the security camera, indeed.
So, the question that naturally begs answering is this: why was only that one article disturbed? The answer is obvious, because it contained the second disc, which the intruder was desperate to retrieve. Since, if it were to fall into the hands of the police, it would be proof of his high treason. Well, Mr. Graydon, do you deny that all of this actually began on that fateful night 2 months ago?
I refuse to accept any of this nonsense.
Sir? There appears to be blood seeping through the sleeve of your jacket.
What?
2 nights ago, we know that 3 shots were fired at the scene of the crime in Windibank's pawnbrokery. One took the life of the pawnbroker himself. One struck the pouch around Mr. Sholmes' waist. And the final bullet struck the calendar on the wall of the shop, having first pierced the arm of one of the intruders. Mr. Graydon, that wound on your arm that you seem to be trying to hide. It's a bullet wound, isn't it? He's got you now, me old China.
Time to call it quits and croak, I reckon. Don't acknowledge my presence there under any circumstances whatsoever. Those were my terms, remember? And I paid you handsomely to comply.
Clearly, I was a fool to think I could trust some common backslum thieves.
Fine, I admit it. I was there in Windibanks that night. I paid this pair 10 guineas to accompany me. And as you've noticed, I sustained an injury in the course of my adventures. But that is all. I admit to nothing more. Stealing government secrets? Negotiating with Mr. McGilded? As God is my witness, I'm sure I recall nothing of the sort.
He's not going down without a fight. Not until I can show hard evidence, I suppose. Nevertheless, the defense has now established a crucial fact. Which is? Well, we know that one bullet was fired from each of the 2 firearms we have in evidence. The bullet from the Skulkin brothers' gun hit the pouch around Mr. Sholmes' waist. And the bullet from Mr. Windibank's gun clearly must have been the one that caught Mr. Graydon on the arm.
Indeed, it must. We can rule out the possibility that the man shot himself.
And that leads us to only one conclusion. Mr. Windibank was shot by a 3rd gun, which can only have been fired by the 3rd intruder.
Goodness!
That's right, Mr. Graydon.
Grrr.
The only person who could have possibly have shot Mr. Windibank that night is you!
Hold it!
You little upstart. You made a grave mistake when you summoned me here.
What? What's that supposed to mean?
Yes, as you rightly say, I was there at the pawnbroker's. I did my best to hide the fact, naturally. I had no intention of ruining the distinguished career I'd built for myself at the communication station. But did the thought never cross your mind? Did you never consider the possibility?
What? What do you mean? What thought? What possibility?
The possibility that if I was there at the scene, I may have witnessed a crucial moment? You see, this makes me a key witness in this case, and I have my hands firmly around the neck of your client.
What?
Are you suggesting?
I saw it all. I saw the very moment that pickpocket girl pointed the gun at that poor defenseless pawnbroker and shot him.
You? What?
Order! 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 Well, It would seem we are finally entering the last act of this theatrical trial.
Mr. Graydon,
Yes?
I trust you are fully aware of the implications here. If it is shown that your claim is false, you will have incriminated yourself as the killer.
Oh, I understand fully.
Then I must ask you to give your formal testimony once more. You will explain to the court precisely what you saw at that moment the defendant allegedly shot the victim.
Nothing would give me greater pleasure.
Alright, wackadoodle. Let's see what you got for us here. Alright, the moment of the shooting.
While these ruffians were jostling with the broker, I was still near the entrance to the shop. When Winnebank threw Nash over the counter, I felt a sharp pain in my arm. I pursued the man, but he shut himself in the storeroom. I could see him through the peephole in the door, though. The accused, in a black coat, shot the man in the back as he was trying to flee to safety. I saw the blood spatter all over that wretched girl. Then she tossed the gun out of the peephole, so I picked it up and made my escape.
Good gracious, this is quite extraordinary testimony. You claim, sir, under oath, to have clearly seen the defendant pulling the trigger.
Yeah, except we sprayed the coat and has Mason's blood on it.
Order, order, order!
It wasn't my intention to testify in this way. But neither is it my intention to be found guilty of a murder I didn't commit. So you see, my hand has been forced. I tell the truth now as an act of self-preservation.
The truth? Until now, the prosecution was completely unaware of these details. Yes, well, sorry about that.
Having shot me in the arm, the pawnbroker was then shot in the back by the accused. As I said, she was showered in his blood.
You say the blood spattered all over the accused's coat. Are you sure on that point?
Oh yes, quite sure. All over the black overcoat that pickpocket girl was wearing at the time.
Really? If her coat could somehow be shown to harbor a vestige of blood, that would be conclusive evidence here.
Such an investigation is entirely possible, my lord. What? Only very recently, a German scientist has developed a technique to identify human blood. So here's the true science, not some amateurish detective's dubious foray into the world of chemistry.
There's nothing dubious about Hurley's work. His ideas are all sound.
Ideas are no use to us here. In science, as in law, theories must be proven before they stand. In Germany, the technique has already been employed in the courtroom as the basis of evidence. Scotland Yard has a small quantity of the chemical reagent used, with your lordship's permission. We could shatter all vestige of doubt within minutes.
This doesn't look good, Runo. Why not? Well, we know, don't we, that there's blood all over the front of Ginny's coat. If they tested with their chemicals...
Oh, help, you're right. I was forgetting what happened yesterday.
Don't move, Ginny, I'm gonna shoot.
That's not Mr. Winnebank's blood. That stain is from 2 months ago. That's Mr. Mason's blood from when he was stabbed by Gilded, who was wearing the coat at that time. My lord, the defense objects to the test proposed by the prosecution.
Overruled. Lord Van Zeeks, make it so at once.
With pleasure, my lord.
And while we await the results, the defense may proceed with the cross-examination.
Once they find that blood on the overcoat, Gina will be...
Counsel,
Yes, my lord?
your cross-examination.
Of course, my lord. This cross-examination doesn't go well. If I don't manage to uncover some decisive evidence or a really compelling clue now, I have a very bad feeling about the outcome of this trial.
Hold it!
Mr. Winnebago emerged from the storeroom, I believe. Ringo and Nash were scouring the counter when he suddenly appeared and flew at them. He already had the revolver in his hand. Fortunately, I wasn't too close. Never been so scared in all my life. Yeah, we're just your regular mild-mannered burglars, that's all. We don't like violence. Says the pair who carry a gun. What do you mean when you say you were near the entrance to the shop?
I was in the doorway, running my eyes over the shelves of forfeited items.
Looking for the music box, of course.
The broker went for Nash in the first place. And then Ringo joined in, making it 2 against 1, so I assumed they could handle the situation. But I was wrong. I was trying to help me little bruv, but the old geezer checked me over the bloomin' counter.
So I pulled my gun on the old fella, and that soon made him scarper.
A pair of you setting upon the poor defenseless pawnbroker together. Shame on you.
Sorry, Gov. When Winnebank threw Nash over the counter, I felt a sharp pain in my arm.
Oops.
Hold it!
I meant to press there. You mean you chased after him?
I don't recall the reason why, but I ran after it to the back of the shop.
And what about this peephole in the door you mentioned? Well, unsurprisingly, the storeroom's door is a solid job, made of stout wood. But there's a small opening at about head height that lets you see what's in there from the outside. Actually, I should know that, shouldn't I? I looked through it myself that night. And what about your burgling brothers? Did you see what went on through this peephole as well?
Not likely, Gov. Didn't see nothing of the sort, Gov. I doubt these 2 buffoons were even aware of the people's existence.
So the Skulker brothers were there, but they didn't see the killing of Mr. Winnebank take place.
Inside the storeroom, I could see the broker and that young girl standing there.
The defendant?
Yes, though neither of them noticed that I was looking. The girl raised her gun and pointed it straight at the man.
And then, what did you say next?
Hold it!
Yes, when the crime was discovered, the defendant was found with a gun in her hand. That was Mr. Winnebank's gun, from which only a single bullet had been fired. And as we've already established, Mr. Grady, that bullet was fired at you.
But no, it wasn't the broker's gun that pickpocket girl had when I saw her. Yes, the bullet from Winnebank's gun grazed my arm, and yes, the Skulkid's gun grounded the detective. But this was another gun entirely, a third gun.
The broker's gun was not the murder weapon, so clearly there had to be a third firearm involved. In other words, the accused must have had her own gun with her at the time.
Objection!
But no other gun was found at the scene.
Calm yourself, counsel.
Sorry?
You must consider the events in order. At first, I saw the broker and the girl glaring at each other, but then, all of a sudden, the broker turned to run. And it was at that moment that little gutter rat shot him in the back.
A chilling image, I must say.
Hold it!
All over her?
Yes, through the peephole, I saw it clearly. Of course, the stains are invisible now, what with the coat being such a dark color. But I assure you, that garment is sullied with the victim's blood.
Well, it is sullied with blood, that's for sure. But it's not Mr. Winnebank's blood, is it? No, that's right. It's Mr. Mason Milverton's blood from when Mr. Gilded stabbed him 2 months ago. It's so annoying. They'd only accept Hurley's chemical analysis. We can prove that. But they won't, so unfortunately, we can't use it as evidence to support our case. Bother. Yeah, but if she was covered in blood, then she should have blood.
Hold it!
Did I hear you correctly? She threw the gun out of the room? That's right. After the broker fell to the floor, she started walking over.
Over where exactly?
In the direction of the storeroom door, to where I was watching. Of course, I quickly retreated, and then the girl dropped the gun through the peephole onto the floor on my side of the door.
But why on earth would she do such a thing?
I couldn't tell you. Perhaps she was hoping to distance herself from the murder weapon. Without thinking, I went and picked it up. I suppose I was worried about just leaving it there in case any more tragedies took place. How generous of you. So it was you, in fact, who took the third gun from the scene of the crime? Yes, it was yours truly. I left the clear up to my lackeys and left. Clear up? We made a bit of a mess around the counter, so Mr. Whistle and Flute here told us to tidy up. He thinks he's our bloomin' bum sometimes. Well, I was paying you enough, by God. Ugh. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? You're like a bull at the gate, aren't you? So what's going on over here? Gentlemen! Something's wrong, Sunshine! That should be my line. You do realize you were just violently shaking, Mr. Stulkin. Blimey, this D's a bit of an ooglegan, ain't he? What was going on just now? You saw him, he grabbed me whistle. Why the blazes, he said, didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down the station? And why didn't you? 'Cause we didn't know nothing about it, with that flaming peephole in the door. I'm sorry about that. I can be prone to losing my rag sometimes. Not hurt, are you? God blimey. See the way he's looking at me? I'm telling you, this D gives me the willies. That was strange. The inspector doesn't normally get quite as worked up as that. He wouldn't normally grab someone. No, that wasn't like Gregsy at all. He's normally all sweetness and light, no matter what I say to him. Yes, well, I think he might be a special case, Iris. Well, anyway, that was definitely out of character. What y'all feeling, Runo? As much as I hate to admit it, I don't see any obvious holes in his testimony at the moment. But you have to find a way to break this man. And quickly, too, because once they discover the blood on the overcoat Gina was wearing... It's a bit strange that he's so sure of himself about seeing the blood spatter over Ginny's coat. It doesn't strike me as the sort of thing you'd claim if you hadn't genuinely seen it happen. We know that Gina didn't shoot Mr. Windbank, so what's going on? All I know is that it's very unfair. Why should some German scientist test be as acceptable as evidence when mine and Hurley's wasn't? Detectives can use test tubes too. Never mind that, so I have to find a really stark inconsistency in this testimony somewhere. And I have to find it before the prosecution discovers the bloodstain on Gina's coat. So I'm gonna press that statement I missed, which I believe was Station 2.
Hold it!
And then I think I can present the picture of the crime scene, because there wasn't blood spatter. Gina had no blood on her. It'd be weird if it was only on the coat, nowhere else. You mean that's the moment you were shot? Yes, though I didn't immediately realize what had happened, of course. Things crashed to the floor from the counter as the three men were brawling. It was at exactly that moment it happened, so I didn't hear the gunshot. And the bullet went on to strike the calendar in the wall behind you. So it would appear. When I looked at my arm, I saw it was bleeding badly, so I wrapped my handkerchief around it. Seeing as I couldn't explain what had happened to the doctor, I had no choice but to wait for it to heal. I didn't imagine it would still be bleeding 2 days later. And Mr. Windbank intend to shoot you, do you think? Well now, I don't imagine he even noticed I was there, to be honest. Perhaps the gun went off accidentally. Anyway, didn't quite strike home. When I pulled my gun on him, he tried to shove me out the way. And then he scarpered through that door out the back. At which point,
what did you do?
my lord! Requesting your lordship's permission to interrupt the cross-examination.
Explain yourself, officer.
I have the results of the test that was ordered earlier, my lord.
The blood on the accused overcoat. Thank you, officer. Very well, the cross-examination is hereby temporarily suspended. I presume you have no objection, counsel?
No, my lord. Well, there you have it.
The report, please, Inspector.
Yes, sir. Traces of human blood were found on the overcoat of the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade. From the extent of the stains, it would appear that they were the result of spattering following a gunshot wound. End of report.
Goodness me.
See, what did I tell you? No, the blood on that coat is not Mr. Windibank's.
What on earth makes you say that, counsel?
The coat originally belonged to Magnus McGilded. Just before his coat was deposited at Windibank's, McGilded had fatally stabbed Mr. Mason Milverton. So the blood on that overcoat is the blood of the brickmaker from the Omnibus Case.
Objection!
Well, the dead cannot speak. Isn't that right, my Nipponese friend?
Sorry.
2 months ago, in this very courtroom, did you not argue fervently for Mr. McGilded's innocence? And yet, now that the man is dead, you brand him as a murderer? Your conduct shadows any shred of respect you may have earned yourself in this country.
But that was... I call it a bally disgrace, treachery, that's what it is. How to determine whether the blood on the coat is 2 months old or not? Even a stereoscope couldn't help the answer to that problem pop out. It can't be done. But we use Mr. Shulm's especially formula... Mr. Shulms is a detective, not a chemist. Would you put such faith in a chemical formula devised by me, for example, when I'm a communications officer? And I held out Perozki to Starving Boy and he ran away crying.
Herlock Shulms is barely more than a figment of the public's imagination. His name carries no weight in this courtroom. No weight at all.
How could you say that? Victory is sweet indeed. This proves that my testimony is the whole truth from start to finish.
How do you arrive at such a conclusion, sir? As the witness said, the accused's coat was spattered with the blood of the victim. The only way Mr. Graydon can possibly have known that fact is if he saw it happen. In other words, his testimony is solid, and the conclusion is singular. It was the accused who shot the victim in this case. That is the whole truth.
Ah! My lord!
Been a long battle this one, but this old warhorse has something to say now, if you please. Mr. Foreman. As of this moment, sir, the squadron has reached its final decision. Ready, men? All for one now. Sir!
Guilty.
Guilty.
Guilty. Guilty.
Guilty.
Guilty.
Well, it would appear that ladies and gentlemen of the jury have reached a unanimous verdict. The defense has consistently failed to unpick this witness's testimony. Here's to any attempt you may make at unpicking the jurors' decisions being equally successful.
I don't believe it. After I've come so far, how is it all unraveling on me so fast?
How very distressing to be held in such low esteem.
Oh. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Naruhodo?
Officer, you've delivered the report now. That will be all, thank you.
It occurs to me with some regularity, Mr. Naruhodo, that scientific truths are determined not by science, but by none other than the human mind. I know that voice.
It was me, Kermit!
Am I going mad? Ah! Oh my god, he has a fake mustache on. Why, hello there.
Mr. Sholmes!
It's Mr. Sholmes!
What is the meaning of this?
Oh my god, he's even Sholmes posing in the bailiff uniform.
Order!
What business do you have here, detective? Last I heard, you were recuperating in the hospital.
Is why I would be, had I not been set up upon an errand.
What errand? Hurley, it's really you! You're awake at last!
Yes, good day, Iris. I appear to be rather late to rise. My apologies. Now, my lord, if you will humor me.
In what manner, sir?
I have something of great importance I wish to give the young lawyer over there. I need no more than 5 minutes. Would you be so kind as to spare us the time?
What say you to this, Lord Van Zeeks? This trial has taken many hours of the court's time. Haven't spent so long already. Exactly, I haven't spent so long already. We don't want to go wasted any more precious time. As I was saying, having spent so long already, it would seem churlish to deny the defense a mere 5 minutes. Eh?
Very well then, counsel. You have 5 minutes.
Wasted our 5 minutes changing back into his uniform.
My dear fellow, I apologize for my tardy arrival.
Mr. Sholmes, are you alright now?
All right, I'm all wrong.
Sorry?
I've only just managed to summon the strength to stand, man. I asked the judge for 5 minutes. But I fear even that may prove too much for me. Pray forgive should I pass out.
Let's make this discussion as short as possible. Hurley, this place is full of idiots. None of them can see how wonderful your chemical blood analysis is.
Well, that concoction of mine was really just a bit of sport to assist me in my investigations. Never took the trouble to refine it for appraisal by the scientific community, in oversight on my part.
Right. Modesty? Surely not.
But enough of that. I'm here to give you this, my dear fellow.
What's that? Lavender furoshiki wrapping?
A leaving present from Miss Susato.
From Miss Susato?
If possible, matters were to be settled without me giving you this. Those were her instructions when she asked me to do her this favor.
I don't understand.
Miss Susato foresaw today's events, I believe. She knew that the culprit would attempt to escape justice by means both devious and underhand, and that you, Mr. Naruhodo, fighting fairly as you want to do, would find yourself in considerable peril. At that very moment of crisis, you were to be given this small parcel. Those were the dear lady's instructions.
A leaving present from Susato-san. Whatever could it be? What is this? Oh! It's the machine I made! Ah. Hello, Agai. Look, I use this. It's my latest invention. What is that? I call it a cat flap-o-mat. I can make a cat flap for a little furry friend like Waggy in seconds. What's Susie up to?
Miss Susato muttered the following words before she left. I'm a failure. I don't deserve to be the judicial assistant.
What? Didn't she say something like that? You really are the best judicial assistant in the world.
Well, that's extremely flattering. But I'm sorry to say that I've been a complete failure.
Whatever did she mean by that, Mr. Sholmes?
That night, when you left Windibanks in pursuit of the thieves, Miss Susanto made use of this contraption for a certain purpose. That is your answer, dear fellow.
Not at all cryptic, then. Susanto-san used this cat flapomat that night? But why? Your 5 minutes is over. We're out of time already.
I am grateful to you for affording us that brief recess, Mr. Reaper.
I need no thanks, Detective. After all, the die is cast.
Is it really?
The jurors are unanimous in their leanings. No doubt my learned friend will consider a summation examination. But any attempt to alter the verdict now would be utterly futile.
I wonder... Mr. Naruhodo!
Yes?
The rest is down to you, dear fellow. What is your plan?
The rest is down to me. I need to be careful here. If I make a wrong move, the trial will end. Badly. My lord, the defense requests... Ooh. I want to look at the court record. What would Susanto-san use the cat flapomat for? What would she use this for? What would she even use the cat flapomat for? What would we get out of a cross-examination? I don't think we'd get anything. What if I press time to think? It's no good. I need time to think.
What do you think you're doing, Mr. Naruhodo?
Sorry?
What of Miss Susanto's gracious gesture? Would you let this final piece of evidence she left you go to waste?
Final piece of...
This is not a time for inaction. This is a time to hear from a witness.
But it's not possible for me to bring a new witness to the stand at this point. I don't think that's what Hurley means, Bruno. Have you forgotten where we are in the trial? Ah.
If the defense has nothing more to add, I think we should proceed to the adjudication.
Wait, my lord. The defense requests further cross-examination.
Objection!
The jurors have spoken. Protocol dictates that you may not cross-examine a new witness now.
Objection!
The defense is not asking for the cross-examination of a new witness, rather to continue with the one of an existing witness. What?
It would appear that a rather important detail has escaped your attention, Mr. Reaper. My lord! Requesting your lordship's permission to interrupt the cross-examination. Thank you, officer. Very well. The cross-examination is hereby temporarily suspended. And I presume you have no objection, counsel?
No, my lord. So nobody can say anything then. If Bruno asked to resume his cross-examination, Mr. Graydon.
The court is obliged to allow it. This is absurd. I would remind those present that this is my courtroom. I concur that the defense is entirely within its rights to request the continuation of the cross-examination. However, I will not permit an unremitting protraction of these proceedings. Therefore, I have decided to afford the defense one final opportunity in concluding the cross-examination. Counsel, you must choose but one statement for the witness's testimony, and but one piece of evidence to present in support of your argument against it.
A single chance to present evidence. You know, I thought it was weird. Why would you have the hole in the door if someone with long arms could reach in and unlock it? I don't think that the window existed. Did Susato make the window?
If following that, the situation remains unchanged, I shall move to adjudication. Is that clear, counsels? You will not press the witnesses any further?
My lord? Yes, my lord.
A single statement and a single piece of evidence. Most generous. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo, it's high time I fell in a dead faint. And I leave this in your capable hands.
No way. He's so extra. Mr. Sholmes! Sholmes is dead. Not really. Hopefully not. That would be horrible. I'm memeing.
To stand so insouciantly before the court in a state of such high fever. Either the man has extraordinary strength of mind, or an extraordinary lack of feelings.
I imagine he's feeling very little now. The detective is sleeping soundly in one of the antechambers. Strike a man when he's down, why don't you?
Well then, counsel, are you fully prepared?
Yes. One statement, one piece of evidence. I won't let Mr. Sholmes down, or Iris. And I won't waste this final chance that Susato-san has given me. This is going to decide the entire outcome of the trial.
Very well then. Under the terms I have outlined, you may resume the cross-examination.
Is this it? Is this it?
Objection! What on earth is that eccentric contraption, counsel?
Ooh, it's my cat flap-a-mat, my lord. Makes a way for cats to get in and out of a room. It can cut through any door you can think of and make a new little door in the middle of it. That's right, my lord. It's a device for creating so-called cat flaps. Small doors for cats to come and go as they please without their owners having to open the main door. I'm sure we can all work that out for ourselves. Ah! But that cat lover's contrivance has no possible relevance to this case. Oh, really? Of course it doesn't. To start with, there was no cat flap in the pawnbroker's door.
Not being a keeper of cats myself, I'm afraid I failed to see what this has to do with the matter at hand.
Perhaps it would help if I described its function another way then. This contraption is able to create a peephole in any door you can imagine in practically no time at all.
I beg your pardon? A peephole, you say?
2 nights ago, we arrived at the scene only minutes after the murder of Mr. Windibank had taken place. That's right, according to the paperwork at the yard. Was you, your Japanese assistant, and Jones. Yes, the 3 of us were together, and it's recently come to my attention that my assistant made use of this device at the time.
Your assistant did what?
There was a peephole in the storeroom door. I can attest to that. Because I looked through the peephole myself in order to see inside the locked storeroom. This is ludicrous. What are you trying to say? I would like to go look at the court record of this picture. There it is. Cat flap did not exist. Of course there was a peephole in the door. I said as much in my testimony. How else could I have witnessed the crime, for pity's sake? Yes. How could you? What?
Counsel, kindly say what you mean.
All right. It's time. Time to strike the final blow. What I mean is this, my lord. My assistant made the peephole in the storeroom door, and until such a time as she did, the door had no hole in it to look through. What? No!
Objection!
This is a farce. Are you really suggesting that the peephole in the door was... Yes, it was created only after the incident had taken place by my judicial assistant using this device.
Your assistant tampered with the crime scene whilst being fully aware of the gravity of her actions. This is the most serious act of vandalism.
For which I humbly apologize, my lord. It was in the few minutes that I left the scene in order to pursue the Skulkin brothers and alert the police. Nevertheless, in the light of this new information, it becomes apparent that Mr. Graydon's testimony is riddled with holes.
Riddled with... Explain yourself, counsel.
The majority of Mr. Graydon's testimony that appears to incriminate the defendant is based upon what he witnessed through the peephole in the storeroom door. Yes, that filthy girl shooting the man in the back. However, if at the time of the incident, that peephole did not yet exist in the door, there's no possible way that you could have seen what you claim to have seen. Grr. In short, your entire testimony is a pack of lies. Ah!
Order! Is there any credence in this revelation?
Objection!
None whatsoever, as my learned friend must surely realize. Exactly, this is just some cheap trick designed to discredit me. I'm afraid not, sir. Of course it is. Do you seriously expect people to believe that plaything can cut through a solid wooden door? Oh yes, I designed it to be very powerful. It can even cut through the toughest of doors. That's absurd. I don't believe it for a second. Ah, I had a feeling you'd say that. What? Waggy, Cooey, time for dinner. Wagahai just walked into the courtroom. Well? Ah!
Young lady, this is the Old Bailey. One does not make cat flaps and yoke peddling at the Old Bailey.
I'm not done yet, don't worry. This doesn't mean that the peephole in the storeroom at Windibank's was made by your machine. And there's no way you could prove that it was. No, but it's easy. What? The cat flap my cat flap-o-mat creates are all of a fixed size. And the dimensions of the peephole at Windibank's are an exact match. Ah! Hee hee, old Silky's lost for words. Excellent work, Iris, thank you. And now it's my learned student's friend's turn to be lost for words, I feel. I believe your judicial assistant has already left the country for your Eastern Island home. Well, yes, that's true. Then you may have some difficulty in establishing all of the facts. For the sake of argument, let us assume that people has dimensions that are a perfect fit for this contraption. In that case, when was the peephole cut? Prosecution demands proof of your answer. Ah,
What is the purpose of your line of inquiry, Lord Van Zeeks?
it's very simple, my lord. The defense argues that the peephole was created after the incident using this device. But now that the perpetrator has returned to her native land, she cannot testify to the fact. There's no proof. And for as long as the defense remains unable to prove when the peephole was made, my lone friend's claim amounts to nothing more than a baseless accusation. What? Good thing I have a photograph. Look at this photograph.
Indeed, that is so, Lord Van Zeeks. Well, counsel.
Don't give up now, Runo. This is the time to create your own opening and force your way through. And I don't know if I can do this, but I do know one thing. Suzata-san is the greatest judicial assistant in the world.
Very well. Counsel for the defense will present evidence to support the claim made. Proof that the peephole in the door of Winterbank storeroom was created after the event and not before.
Take that!
What are you? A print from that detective's infernal cameras again. My judicial assistant, Miss Susato Mikotoba, is an extremely intelligent and capable woman, which is why I never had any cause to doubt that she would have considered this scenario and made sure I had the necessary proof.
And the necessary proof is this photographic print, counsel.
This print shows a scene in the shop moments after the defendant entered the premises. Agreed. And it also shows the accused mercilessly wielding a gun in the direction of the defenseless broker. But more to the point, it pictures the storeroom door in the background.
Let me see that print again. Why, I don't believe it. That really is quite remarkable. The door to the storeroom is completely devoid of a peephole of any description.
Ah! Mr. Graydon, you couldn't possibly have witnessed the crime as you claim to have done, because at the time it happened, there was no peephole in the door. Ugh. In other words, your testimony is a catalog of lies. Ah!
Order! I am satisfied that the defense has substantiated its claim beyond all reasonable doubt. This witness's testimony was entirely fallacious.
That's not the only thing we now know beyond all reasonable doubt. My lone friend's assistant's guilt can no longer be denied when tampered with a crime scene. But more importantly,
Good Lord, there's more, Lord Van Zeeks.
the defense may have established a reprehensible instance of perjury. But that is no proof that this man is the victim's killer. Yes, that's right. What? I was there at the scene. It's true. And I was shot in the arm. It's true. But that's all. Yes, in fact, if you look at the circumstances, I am the victim here. Oh, please. No. I don't believe this. But they're right, as it stands now. I don't have any definitive proof that he is the culprit. Still, he can't worm his way out of it now. Iris, you know what they say. There's no point in locking a cat's door after the cat is bolted. Isn't that right, Runo? As Hurley always says, one lie begets another. No, wait. That might have been a line I wrote for him in one of my stories. Well, no matter who said it first, you're right. Mr. Graydon, not only did you give false testimony to the court, but the lies you told make no sense. Make no sense. What do you mean by such a remark? What you said in your testimony reveals that you know something you shouldn't have known. In other words, there is a fundamental inconsistency in your statement. What?
Objection!
This is provocative talk, counsel. Won't you enlighten the court? Explain this alleged inconsistency. Iris was right. One lie begets another. The inconsistency is revealed by the lies in the witness's statement. And they show that Mr. Graydon had knowledge of something he shouldn't have known anything about. Namely, the bloodstains that were present on Miss Lestrade's coat. That's right, the victim's blood spattered all over her when she shot him. But how could you possibly have known that? Obviously, because I saw her do it through the peephole in the door. And the point is not that you lied in your testimony, Mr. Graydon. It's the nature of the lie you concocted that is so revealing. You're not making any sense. And then let me ask you a simple question. How is it, Mr. Graydon, that you knew of the existence of the people in the storeroom door? What? Well, obviously,
Has the cat got your tongue, witness?
The peephole in the door was made after the incident occurred. And once I returned to the shop, having failed to catch the two burglars, Scotland Yard's investigators arrived immediately. Since that time, the police have been at Windibanks constantly carrying out their investigation. Isn't that right, Inspector Gregson? Well, yes, of course. The place is chock full of pawned articles and my lads have to thoroughly examine them all. So I gave the order to have officers working around the clock in shifts so we get through it all. And consequently, there's no way that you, Mr. Graydon, could have gained access to the shop. Therefore, you should have known nothing about the people in the storeroom door. So the fact that its existence forms the basis of your testimony is completely inexplicable.
Objection!
And yet, the fact remains that Mr. Graydon did maintain that he witnessed the crime take place through the peephole in the door.
How on earth is that possible?
Could I have a word, please, Lord Van Zeeks?
Speak, Inspector.
It's just that I really ought to be getting back to the station now to put in my report. There's really nothing more I can add to this testimony, so if it's all the same to you...
Permission denied.
Oh!
It's not all the same to me, Inspector. Not at all. You will remain exactly where you are until this trial concludes.
Of course, sir!
Mr. Graydon, you shouldn't have known about the existence of that peephole. Which can only mean that you must have been informed about it by somebody else.
Objection!
Stop there, my learned friend. You realize, I trust, that the words you just uttered have extremely serious implications.
Yes, but the defense believes that the details about the case that Mr. Graydon claims to have seen must have been revealed to him by a certain person before his testimony. And, in fact, considering a particular clue we have, there's really only one person that could be.
Who is the person in question, counsel? Who gave this witness details of the crime scene to facilitate his false testimony?
Take that!
The truth is, it can only have been you, Inspector Gregson. Me?
Objection!
You had better have some proof to substantiate such a rash claim, my learned friend.
Consider the fact that we have only been aware of Mr. Ashley Graydon's identity for the last few hours. We learnt of it only during the course of the trial today.
Indeed, preparations for his testimony were made with great urgency during our hour-long recess, while the police executed the subpoena and brought the man here from the communication station.
And until that time, Mr. Graydon would have had no idea. No inkling that he would suddenly be required to appear in court.
Are you suggesting that until such time he was summoned?
Yes, my lord. Until then, it's reasonable to assume he knew nothing of the peephole. It was only once Mr. Graydon was in the stand that he realized his position, and that he would have to defend himself against the accusation that he was the third intruder. You're suggesting to the courts that it was while this trial was in progress that he received the information, so that he could commit perjury in order to save his skin? Exactly. And the only person with knowledge of the investigation that he had any contact with is you, Inspector Gregson. This is a bloomin' outrage! Why would I be giving away details of our investigation to this fella, eh? I was summoned to his lordship's chambers during the recess in any case. Had you forgotten that?
Quite true. I had a number of questions regarding events that transpired at the pawnbrokery.
Which means... the first time these two laid eyes on one another was after proceedings resumed following the recess. Since then, they've been in full view of the stand, where such illicit discussions couldn't possibly have occurred. Ah, well, except the time we interrupted them talking to each other. Ooh, I've just remembered something, Runo. What is it, Iris? There was one time before, wasn't there? I think it was when Jeannie was testifying. Oh yes, now you mention it. When the bailiff was dispatched to retrieve McGilda's music box from the scene of the crime. That's it. It was during that testimony. I remember finding it strange at the time. Mr. Graydon and the inspector seemed to be having some kind of secret discussion. It would have been possible for you to give Mr. Graydon the information he needed then. You little toe rag, you're making all this up! I'm a respectable Scotland Yard inspector, for crying out loud! Why would I do something like that? Why would I be giving away confidential details to the likes of this bloke? Admittedly, you wouldn't have had any reason to do something like that for no gain. But perhaps it was part of a deal of some kind. Then it starts to make more sense. What deal, counsel? And I wonder if perhaps, in exchange for details about the people at the crime scene, Mr. Graydon agreed to give a certain something to the inspector. The second disc.
I'm sure I need not remind the inspector that, if found to be true, striking a deal with any kind of a witness would be considered a gross case of malfeasance.
Well, I...
Objection!
It's becoming clear that jumping in with accusations is his Nipponese student's specialty. I don't do that. But with the stakes so high, the prosecution is not prepared to listen to baseless charges. It is incumbent on the defense now to present evidence in support of this diabolical claim. Evidence? Just what are you proposing that the inspector demanded of the witness in return? The court must see proof of this alleged deal. If Inspector Gregson really did strike a deal with Mr. Graydon, then logically there's only one thing he could have asked for. That must be it. Runo, do you think it could be? Yes. It's the missing link that will join all the dots together in this puzzle.
I must press you for an answer now, counsel. What evidence explains the nature of the alleged deal that Inspector Gregson made with the witness?
Take that!
Inspector Gregson! Besides this murder, is it not true that you've been working on another very important case? What? What are you getting at now, Sunshine? Is it possible that this other top-secret case is what's alluded to in this newspaper article here? The classified secrets being leaked overseas from the Ministry of Justice. How the bleeding Nora could you... We discovered during the course of this trial the music box deposited in Windibanks by Magnus McGilded. A special music box designed to play 2 discs at once. It would seem very likely now that encoded on the pair of discs that were in McGilded's possession are the leaked classified secrets. So I put it to you, Inspector, that in order to recover the second disc containing those secrets, you covertly made a deal with Mr. Graydon in which you exchanged the disc for details of the case. You little... Ah!
Order, order, order!
On the day of the incident, when we met you at Windibanks, you said this. I'll be taking that whatever it is of McGilda's down to the yard, thank you very much. So hand it over. No, don't give it to him. It's mine, that is. Mine. I'm sorry, miss, but anything belonging to McGilda has to be taken in as evidence now. Scotland Yard already knew at that time, isn't that right? That Magnus McGilda was involved in the stealing of government secrets. My orders were, recover the medium used to convey the secrets leaked from the ministry, and do it on the QT, strictly hush-hush. And that explains why, when I presented this disc as evidence to the court, you objected so heavily, I presume? Because you knew that it contained highly confidential information. Blimey, not likely. I mean, I wasn't that sure of it myself. I realized there was a possibility, that's all.
Inspector, surely you're not saying that in order to acquire the second of these music box discs, you did indeed reveal confidential details of the crime scene to the witness? To aid and abet this man in giving false testimony?
There's no other way that Mr. Grading could have known of the existence of the peephole. It's the only explanation. A deal was struck between these two men. No! Well, I wasn't expecting this. If, and I stress if, this sobering assertion turns out to be founded in truth, it would mean that the second disc is, as we speak, here in this very courtroom. Wait, what? In this room? How could you possibly make a claim like that? Because Inspector Gregson is a Scotland Yard detective. What? What's that supposed to mean, eh? As a seasoned policeman, the inspector will have approached this alleged deal with caution. Certainly, he would not have accepted a gentleman's agreement in this matter. No, he would have insisted on having the article agreed upon in the palm of his hand.
Good gracious, then you mean to say Inspector Gregson already has the item in question in his possession? He has the second disc actually on his person?
Yes!
The defense demands that the inspector is searched at once. Definitely. They could only have struck a deal with each other when Ginny was testifying before. And Gregsy hasn't moved from the witness stand since. My lord, please, order an examination of personal effects immediately.
Well, Inspector.
This young lad wants to tone down his imagination. He's insulted me in my profession quite enough. However, if it'll put this matter to bed and dispel any doubts about my involvement, then I'll happily submit to a body search. What? He's going to agree to it? I presume you're aware of the precipice on which you now teeter, my learned student friend. You've made a most serious allegation against Scotland Yard here. If, following the search of the inspector's personal effects, no disc is found, you will be deemed unfit for court service. This trial will end, and my country's government will formally demand of yours that you are severely reprimanded. That sounds serious.
Indeed, to have a visiting student make such defamatory remarks about our country's most senior police force is not something Her Majesty's government will be able to overlook.
You're just threatening Runo because you're scared. The accusation is beyond serious. You must be prepared for grave consequences. And it's true. I can't imagine Gregson would have accepted a gentleman's agreement for something so critical. The disc must have physically changed hands, which means the inspector should have it. But somehow, something doesn't feel quite right here.
Very well, counsel. You know the implications, so let me ask you one final time.
Yes, my lord?
Do you still persist in formally requesting a search of the inspector's personal effects?
Oh, search someone else. Oh, it's the Nash. It's Nash. He put it on Nash's pocket. He put it in Nash's pocket. Yes, the defense formally demands the search be conducted.
Well,
not to say you weren't warned, but your typical Nipponese stubbornness may well land you in hot water this time. Perhaps the lesson will do you some good. Fair enough, I've got nothing to hide.
Very well then. Bailiff, conduct a search of the inspector's personal effects.
The defense demands a search, but not of the Inspector Gregson. What? Now what's all this? I'm the one you're accusing, aren't I? I thought you wanted to search me! No, Inspector, not you. Somebody else. What's the meaning of all this, eh? Lost it at last, have you, sunshine? The court shouldn't have to put up with this nonsense. You're being completely irrational. Be quiet, all of you. Oh, be quiet, all of you! Bruno's doing what you all told him to do and having the courage of his convictions. So you should respect that and listen to what he has to say in good faith. Because that's the British way.
Well said, young lady. Indeed, this court is in awe of the defense counsel's conviction and eagerly awaits his next words.
You what? Now don't be hasty, my lord! If I'm not mistaken about things I've seen in court today, I'm fairly sure that I know who has the disc at the moment. There's only one person it can be.
Counsel, of whom do you request this search now?
Tall boy.
Take that!
Of, my lord, Mr. Nash Skulkin.
Well, I never.
Eh? Blimey! Me? Him?
Very well then, bailiff. Restrain the witness and conduct a thorough search of his personal effects.
Hold it!
Please, my lord! Inspector?
Inspector,
Scotland Yard has to object to this search!
Objection!
Unfortunately for you, Inspector, your objections carry no weight here. Eh? In this courtroom, only the prosecution and defense have the authority to object. But Lord Van Zieks! I have no idea what forces are in play that might influence your actions. But personally, I have no intention of obstructing the course of this trial. Ah!
bailiff, carry out the search.
Now hold on a mo. I don't know nothing. Nothing about no disc. Cut it out! Nah!
Here, my lord, in the witness's pocket. I found this. Good lord, that's...
Another music box disc. I don't know nothing about it, nothing. That is the second music box disc left behind by Magnus McGilded. Is it not, Inspector Gregson? Ah! Ah!
Order! Mr. Skulkin, what do you have to say for yourself?
Gordon Bennett! I just Gordon Flamin' Bennett! I swear I didn't know nothing about that disc! Honest to God!
Counsel, would you please explain what exactly is going on here? The alleged deal that was struck between this witness and this detective, no?
Without question, my lord.
Then, for pity's sake, why on earth was this man in possession of the disc that the inspector traded for information?
Inspector Gregson is a shrewd, calculating man who rarely loses his composure. But at one particular point in his trial, he exhibited some unusual behavior for a brief moment.
I don't recall. What unusual behavior?
Ah! It was, yes, during my cross-examination of Mr. Graydon. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? I admit to nothing of the sort. While Mr. Graydon answered my questions, the inspector appeared to have grabbed Nash Skulkin by his coat and was shaking him violently. Yeah, he did know. Thought me noggin was fall clean off, I did. I was wishing I'd been born as my brother I was. He'd be short and out of reach. And what exactly happened to make the detectives attack you like that? I ain't got a clue. He just suddenly turned and grabbed me with that whistle like that and started shaking me. Why the blazes didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down to the station? That's what he said. Yelled it right down my ear hole. He did. My head's still throbbing now. The way Detective behaved then was extremely out of character. But looking back now, it must have been then that he did it. That was the opportunity Inspector Gregson created for himself in order to hide the disc.
Well, bless my wig, he hid it.
No!
But I'm afraid I failed to comprehend the motive here. If the detective had acquired the disc he was after, why on earth would he proceed to hide it in another man's pocket? This is a court of law. He could have submitted the item as evidence.
It would appear, my lord, that the inspector was not at liberty to do that.
Why ever not?
As the man himself revealed earlier, his current assignment has some special conditions. My orders were recover the medium used to convey the secrets leaked from the ministry, and do it on the QT. Strictly hush-hush.
Hush-hush, a top-secret assignment, is it?
As far as we're aware, the information stolen comes from a confidential government communication. It would seem that if the information were to be revealed in court as evidence, it would be problematic. Does that sum up the situation, Inspector? And I'm operating under direct orders from the ministry. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to answer that question. So, realizing there was a chance that you may be searched here in court, you took steps to hide the disc you'd acquired from the witness.
Does this mean?
He only pretended to attack Mr. Skulkin in order to get close enough to him to slip the second disc into his pocket.
So it was all a pretense? Well now, Inspector Gregson, and you, Mr. Graydon, are you prepared to admit the accusation made against you of this alleged deal?
Admit to it. Yours truly, please. Mr. Graydon. Clearly our eastern visitor has an uncommonly active imagination. However, there's no proof that I passed that disc on to the inspector.
Objection.
But then, how do you explain the reason why you knew about the peephole? I'm under no obligation to explain. What? Yes, I lied in my testimony. That I admit, so sentence me accordingly. But that is all I admit. Murder, leaking government secrets, striking a deal with a detective. All of it is this young Easter man's fancy. I have no idea what any of that is about. You... What? Ooh. Well, what about you then, Inspector Gregson? Do you admit to making a deal with Mr. Graydon in order to acquire the disc? Ladies and gents of the jury, as a Scotland Yard inspector, I will declare this and nothing more. I am acting in the best interests of the country. Whatever I've done, it's been in the name of justice. So, as members of the public of this fine country, I'd like to think that justice will be your guiding light when you're making your decisions.
This is quite a quandary indeed. Rarely have I encountered such extraordinary tumultuousness in the concluding of a trial. Nevertheless, in the absence of any further evidence to be presented, I believe it is time that we put the matter to the jury for their final leanings.
Well now, as a fellow servant of Queen Country, I must say I sympathize with the old inspector. Yes, he's a dependable man, I'm quite sure. In service, one becomes a good judge of character. My voice went out there. Oops. Even crossing your eyes doesn't help when it comes to looking at this case. It's all blurred to me.
Well, as a fellow professional, I'd like to put my faith in the detective, really.
Graydon is highly skilled operator. Stop. Currently in presence of idol. Stop. Detective has very much trust in eyes. More than this I cannot say. I don't believe it. The 6 jurors are they're going to believe Gregson if they declare their decision now. Is Ginny gonna be found guilty? If I don't manage to produce some definitive evidence right now, then we're going to lose. Either some proof that Graydon killed Mr. Windibank or stole those government secrets, or some evidence to force Gregson into admitting that he struck a deal with the witness.
Well then, counsel, I think it's time I imposed on the jurors to declare their final decisions, no? That is, unless you have some compelling evidence you have thus far not presented to the court.
If I let the judge call on the jurors to announce their leanings, Gina will be found guilty. So there's no choice then, Rudo. You have to throw some more evidence at them. This is it now. It all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against, Gregson or Graydon? Ooh. I don't know, maybe it's not a good decision, but I have faith in the jury. I feel like the jury would vote innocent here. But I'm worried. Unless we present this against Gregson, maybe Gregson, there's a betrayal of Gregson here. I don't know. Do we have anything to present? It only does one, so I'm gonna leave it to the jury. I can't possibly decide this. I think all I can do is leave it in the jury's capable hands at this— No, Rudo! Look how far we've come! This is the final stretch! You need to pick the most explosive piece of evidence and throw it at the weakest witness. Hard! Just before you do, you deserve an explosive punishment for that weakest of decisions. Ugh, this will be the final blow, and I need to decide where to place it for myself.
Your answer then, please, counsel.
This is it now. It all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against, Gregson or Graydon? Ooh. Ah. We've presented everything except the manuscript. Do we throw the manuscript at Gregson? Inspector Gregson, there is one final piece of evidence I would like you to see. Eh? What's that then? If you refuse to acknowledge that you did in fact strike a deal with the witness here today, then you leave us no choice but to examine this piece of evidence thoroughly. Well, go on! This is my last chance. It looks like I'm going to have to force his hand here. One final piece of evidence to get this detective to admit to the deal he clearly stuck with Graydon. I feel like Gregson had some shenanigans in here, and that's why Sholmes doesn't want to publish.
Take that!
What on earth is this, counsel?
Irrefutable proof, my lord, of the corrupt dealings that went on between these two men.
Or perhaps
Irrefutable proof of the corrupt workings of my learned friend's mind. Or not, okay. Alright, so we're down to 2. Alright. There's no love lost between them, clearly. It was strictly business. If you think about it, murder and treason are both such serious crimes. Yes, punishable by death. So I don't think old Silky's gonna admit to either anytime soon, do you? No, but Gregson, on the other hand, he is just refusing to admit what has happened because he's been sworn to secrecy out of a sense of duty. I wonder, if Gregsy's lips are sealed because he's determined to do his duty, then perhaps to prise them open. You're gonna have to be determined enough to do your duty too, Runo. And of course, he'd do anything to follow his orders, so... Alright, so it is definitely presenting against Gregson. The question is what? The question is what? Maybe... Would this have any bearing? Ooh, I don't think so. Gina's defense makes no sense. The blood doesn't really make sense. I mean, this would be a step above presenting the ticket. This is what he would have taken from the scene. And it means they'd have everything they need. Or is it... I was thinking maybe the bullet, the third bullet, because... You know, him messing up proves that he messed up the search and that there was the third person, but there's no third gun, so I don't know. When they were bringing the box is when we talked about Gina. And that second disc came from the box. It was stolen from the box. Oh. I mean, we got two left. Let's present this. And if not... Oh, music.
Is that Mr. McGilded's Peculiar Music Box Council?
Yes, with a disc already in place, ready to play. And I think perhaps now would be a good time to listen to the sound produced by the music box again. Only this time... with the second disc we've just discovered set in place as well.
Goodness, this disc council!
No, wait! I can't let you do that! Why not? Because, well... because it's got nothing to do with this case! That's why!
Objection.
Not true, Inspector? Eh? The defense has already proposed that the sounds heard by the court earlier from this music box were part of a Morse Code message. We know that Morse Code compromises of two distinct tones. The defense believes that the second disc contains the second tone needed to complete the message. And now we have a chance to confirm that theory. We're crying out loud, Sunshine! We're talking about state secrets here! If you go letting the whole courtroom hear confidential information like that, it's treason! Then do you admit the charge? That in order to protect those state secrets, you engaged in unlawful dealings with the witness. You're mad! If you let that secret information out to the public domain, you'll be making an enemy of the entire British government, you idiot!
Objection.
Let's not forget, Inspector, that you, a Scotland Yard officer, leaked confidential case details to a witness. That you continue to lie to the courts, and all because, by fair means or foul, you're determined to do your duty. Well, by fair means or foul, I'm prepared to do mine. Don't you dare! I will stop at nothing to protect my clients. I don't care who I make an enemy of. My lord, if you please. The court must hear the sounds made by that music box. Come on, Van Zeeks, for Pete's sake, stop him!
Objection.
Inspector, you should know my methods by now. I'm a prosecutor. I'm no Scotland Yard puppet. Ah! In this courtroom, my duty is to the law, so let me propose a toast to uncovering the truth, by fair means or foul. No!
Very well, the defense stance here and that of the prosecution has been made very clear, I feel. Therefore, in accordance with the defense's request, the court will now listen as this music box is set in operation once more. This time with the second disc in place and both discs playing simultaneously.
Oh, listen to that. It's unmistakable now. It's Morse Code. All right, I admit it. Whatever you want. But for the love of God, shut that bloomin' box up. Let me ask you again, Inspector Gregson. Did you, or did you not, strike a deal with the witness next to you in the stand, Mr. Ashley Graydon?
Specifically, did you furnish the witness with confidential case details in exchange for this music box disc? Did you reveal the existence of the peephole in the pawnbroker's storeroom, Inspector?
I did! Stop! What are you doing, man? It's all exactly like the young Eastern lawyer said. When the trial resumed after the recess, we stood here in the stand together. That's when he approached me with the deal. Shut up, you imbecile. Shut up. Psst, you there. You're the detective who turned up at the pawnbroker the other day, aren't you? I may have something you're looking for, Inspector, with me at this very moment. So how about a trade? I suggest you accept. Or information that may make certain individuals uncomfortable will soon become very public indeed. I couldn't let that information become public knowledge, not under any circumstances. So I accepted the man's proposal and told him details about the case that should have put him in the clear. The peephole in the storeroom door and the bloodstains on the overcoat. By giving false testimony, this witness intended to have the defendant wrongly accused of murder. Inspector, you knew that. Yet you still revealed those details to facilitate the witness's perjury. I did. But then it turned out that the peephole had only been made that night after the incident took place. Scotland Yard wasn't aware of that, if I'm perfectly honest. Well, Mr. Graydon, what do you have to say for yourself? There's nothing and no one left for you to hide behind. You struck a deal with the inspector in order to escape conviction of a very serious crime. Namely this. You are the third intruder who broke into the pawnbroker in the night in question. And you perpetrated the murder of the proprietor, Mr. Park Blvd N Ste. You! Traitor! Oh. Bro, he's gonna murder Gregson. Excuse me? You just choke on a fry? What?
Bailiff, restrain that man! At once!
That's it then. It's all over. And I despise my life growing up. No, I despise my life growing up. Those slums are vile places. I was cursed from birth, born into poverty, the son of a penniless artisan. My parents did nothing but quarrel all day long. What little money they had was never spent on me.
So I set about studying to better myself, to one day escape from that hellhole.
And you eventually became a communications officer. I admire your determination.
But then you decided to try to sell government secrets. Why? Isn't it obvious? Because I wanted money. Even now, years later, the nightmares of my life in the slums wake me in the small hours. I wanted to drown them out with more money than anyone who lived in that squalor could ever imagine. Then one day, I met him. Mr. Magnus McGilded. You're a fiend with acquired talent, so you are. I've the money to throw your way if you're interested. All you need to do is go along with my little plan now. I was to steal the ministry's telegraphic message logs, and McGilded would buy them for a handsome sum. As I was responsible for inspections of the ministry's communications office, it was a simple enough task. The nerve, the devil's offerings. How easy it is to succumb.
But you must surely have realized the seriousness of the crime you were committing.
And for that reason, I took great lengths to ensure that my actions were untraceable. By using the music box. My father was a brickmaker, though my mother divorced him when I was still a child. Yes, Mr. Mason Milverton. That's right. He was very skilled with his hands. He'd once been a music box maker's apprentice. I imagined his skills would be sufficient to create a machine that could generate Morse Code. So I sought out my father again, to employ his services. It was the first time I'd seen him since I left the slums 10 years earlier.
Look at you, Ashley. What a fine gent you've become, eh?
He was a different man to the one in my memory, a thin, frail old man. But poverty had never broken him, never corrupted him like it had me. I was sure that he wouldn't help me if I told him the real reason, so I made up a story. I've got some work for you, Father. Need some music box discs made.
Music box discs, eh?
A musician friend of mine has written some music he wants to sell to the public, and I brought the score with me. There are 2, actually.
I'd be delighted, son. It's been 20 years since I did any work like this, though. Fetch my tools, would you? They're in the loft.
That's how I had him make the 2 discs. Thereby splitting the information in 2. You were taking considerable precautions indeed. It was to protect myself as much as anything. It meant that I could deal with McGilded in 2 separate transactions. The first involved the first of the 2 discs and the music box for playing them. I exchanged them with McGilded for 10 guineas. Then, on receipt of the second disc, he would pay 1,000 guineas. So, what happened on the Omnibus 2 months ago was the second part of a deal, the exchange of the second disc. Yes, I'd sold the man information that way a number of times already, but it seems he became reluctant to part with his money.
That doesn't quite make sense, Mr. Graydon. For why it was on that omnibus 2 months ago. Your father, Mr. Milverton, was the one dealing with Mr. McGilded, not yourself.
When I received 1,000 guineas after my first completed dealings with McGilded, I decided to give 200 to my father for his troubles. But my father realized something was amiss. In time, he worked out that I must be involved in something dubious, and when he did, he said to me,
"Next time there's an exchange, I'll let your old man do it, understand? Otherwise, I won't take your money anymore."
That was my father's way of dealing with it, I suppose. Climb into the omnibus, hand over the second disc, and take the money from McGilded. That's it. He had no idea what was actually on the discs I'd asked him to make. He never knew. Just like I'll never know why everything went so horribly wrong that night. All I know is that the disc was taken from him, and he never returned home. It was only then that I found out what sort of monster McGilded really was. So after 10 years of not once uttering it, I swore on my father's name. To exact revenge. Revenge? As anyone with even the remotest knowledge of the man will no doubt be able to imagine, Gilded brought all his wealth and influence to bear in the most despicable of ways. To crush any semblance of justice in his trial. The crime scene was tampered with, evidence was fixed, and witnesses were bribed. That trial 2 months ago was a farce from start to finish. My feet had barely touched British soil back then, and I walked into that hornet's nest completely unaware of the sinister background to it all. I'd made plenty of money out of my dealings with Gilded by then, so I spared nothing in my arrangements 2 months ago. I knew exactly who to hire. If you're willing to pay the price, there are people in this city willing to do anything you ask. Gilded himself had shown me that. Are you saying that? I think you have the picture now. After he twisted everything to his favor in this courtroom to ensure he walked free, I took matters into my own hands and delivered the justice that monster deserved. That tragic accident following the trial here 2 months ago was planned and executed by yours truly. Gilded's death that day was caused by this man.
Everything is ready, sir, if you'd like to follow me into the courtroom.
What's this, officer? 'Tis sooner than I was led to believe.
I hope it's not inconvenient, sir. There are some changes to the schedule.
Well, I must be making tracks now. 'Tis time for the inspection. They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself. So that policeman who came to tell Gilded he could examine the omnibus again. That's right, an imposter hired by me. Gilded used his wealth to manipulate the trial. I used my wealth to manipulate his life. He paid people to adulterate the omnibus with all manner of false evidence. He threatened witnesses to lie in their testimony. So I gave the man a taste of his own medicine. Once the omnibus was doused in paraffin, one of my sham policemen ushered Gilded inside and sent him on a one-way journey to hell. An eye for an eye. That's how I avenged my father's death.
A spine-chilling account indeed.
But that wasn't the end of it for me. There was a loose end, you see. A loose end? Yes, I should think it's obvious. The second disc, which my father had taken to exchange with Gilded.
Ah, yes. There was indeed no mention of it in the man's trial 2 months ago. Clearly because it had been removed from the scene of the crime.
When I realized it was missing, I remembered something. Something from the first time I dealt with Gilded. This is the first of 2 discs in the music box you need to play them. Well, look at that now. What an ingenious little invention. So then, as promised, 10 guineas for you, young man. What's this? Windibank's pawnbrokery? Aye, 'tis a pawnbroker's ticket, so it is. You can use it to redeem an article I've deposited there for you. There's no need to give a name, just hand over the ticket and tell the fiend the watchword. And I put a jewel in pawn for you. It'll fetch a good 10 guineas if you sell it, so it will. I've never heard of a pawnbrokery being used in quite that way before. Have you not, Mr. Graydon? London's pawnbrokeries are very useful places, you know? Each one is like an extremely secure vault. So I knew that if he'd taken steps to hide the disc, it would be in that pawnbrokery somewhere. And on that night he killed my father, he must have entrusted the ticket to someone. Yes, to Gina. Now remember now, that when we first met you at Windibank's that afternoon 2 days ago,
You had a description of Miss Lestrade written down. How did you know who you were looking for?
From the trial, that pickpocket's testimony was clearly peculiar. Anyone could see that. I realized immediately that she was another McGilded's pawns, and he must have threatened her somehow. I was fairly convinced it would be her who had the ticket. So I started to make some inquiries. I had a strong suspicion the girl would come out of the woodwork on the redemption deadline.
And he was absolutely right.
And yes, sure enough, she did. All I needed to do was wait until the girl went to Windibank's to redeem the articles. But unfortunately, she redeemed only McGilded's overcoat and the one disc that was in its pocket. The all-important music box with the second disc inside was missing,
because it had already been forfeited 2 days earlier.
But I was unaware of that fact. Had I not been, I could have avoided my nighttime excursion.
Meanwhile, as our investigation into stolen government secrets was progressing, we'd picked up on the fact that McGilded was involved. Inspector, you've recovered fast. My orders were to recover the stolen information as quickly as possible, so we started gathering the fellow's possession and examined whatever we could lay our hands on. We had a full-scale investigation going on at the yard, but we had to keep it as quiet as we could.
Then, when the inspector here took the disc from me in the pawnbrokery that day, I became nervous. I was sure the music box and the second disc were still there in the shop somewhere. So I knew that it was a race against time, and I had to find those articles before the police did.
So that's what prompted you to break into the place that same night. With the help of your old friends, the Skulkin brothers.
What happened that night in the pawnbrokery, I can only describe as a nightmare. While Nash and Ringo were searching the counter, I'd located the music box I'd sold to McGilded on the shelves of forfeited articles.
And the second disc was inside?
Yes, and I slipped it into my pocket with a very deep sigh of relief. But then, something entirely unexpected happened.
What are you doing in my shop?
The gunshot rang out in the shop, and I felt a sharp pain in my left arm.
The broker fired his gun, and the bullet pierced your limb.
Yes, exactly. But unfortunately, I decided to bring my own gun with me that night, just in case. Before I knew what was happening, I'd fired back. The man had already turned to flee. I hadn't intended to fire in his direction, much less kill him. But unfortunately for both of us, the bullet hit home. It struck him in the middle of his back as he fled through the storeroom door for refuge.
Sorry, Tail.
It all took place in the blink of an eye. And I don't imagine Nash and Ringo even realized what had happened at first. And I was terrified, so I fled. And that's the whole story. That's everything that happened at Windibank's on that wretched night.
Earlier, you called McGilded a monster. A man who used his wealth and influence to distort the facts and escape justice for the crime of murder. What tragic irony. For what you have done is exactly the same. You've become the very monster you saw and despised so deeply in McGilded.
Yes, I think I have.
Well, this has been a long and exhausting trial. However, it would seem that at last we have arrived at the truth. Inspector Gregson, what of Mr. Ashley Graydon?
He's been restrained, my lord, and is being escorted to the yard. He'll be charged with the murder of Mr. Windibank and the stealing of government secrets.
Very good. And you, Inspector, regrettably, you will have to face charges yourself.
Yes, my lord, of course! It transpires that you are complicit in helping a criminal escape justice. That fact remains, whether or not you are doing so in the line of duty. The crime is a serious one, Inspector, and inexcusable.
Now to the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade.
Ah, yeah?
It is time for the final adjudication. Is the jury ready, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, sir. Gilded Squadron standing by, sir. This is really it now. The last push, the final call, the finishing whistle. My men are ready to deliver their verdicts.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You will now declare your final decisions to the court.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
The mouse jumped when he hit the button. That was cute. That's the stuff. I'm off the hook. Finally, Runo, you finally managed to do it. Finally is the word. I really wasn't sure if we'd come out on top for a while there. Susie was right. You're the best lawyer in the world.
Miss Lestrade, I am not finished with you yet.
Eh? What are you looking at me like that for?
Before you start enjoying your freedom, there are certain other crimes to consider.
Eh?
2 months ago, in that courtroom no less, you gave false testimony, did you not? And in relation to the trial today, not only did you unlawfully enter Mr. Windermeck's pawnbrokery, you also attempted to abscond with Mr. McGilda's property, it seems.
Eh? I never done nothing of the sort. No, of course not. It's not like you were gleefully wearing McGilda's coat in your cell yesterday or anything. Oh, just when I thought I was getting excited about throwing a party for Ginny this evening.
And turning our attention to the defense, determining that when played together, the music box discs contained a message in Morse Code was, well, it was certainly a most unexpected revelation, counsel.
Quite so, my lord. The prosecution was caught entirely off guard. In fact, I think we should applaud my learned friend's courage here today. I propose a toast to demanding that government secrets be disseminated before the entire courtroom. Ah! Very sorry about that. It was the only way that I could get Inspector Gregson to admit what he'd done, so... If I may say something on that point... Isn't that... It's about the sounds produced by the music box before. I do wonder if that was really Morse code at all. What? What are you saying, madam? Oh, well, it's just that I'm really rather fanatical when it comes to Morse code, you see? So much that the whole world seems to be covered in dots and dashes to me, in fact.
Goodness, madam. An unhealthy level of obsession, one feels.
But I must say that, in my opinion, the sounds produced by those two discs were nothing more than that. A meaningless series of two different tones. What? What? Can that really be? It wasn't Morse code after all? My lord, the defense would like to listen to the music box again. Are you off your nut? How many times do I have to tell you? Those discs contain ministerial secrets, sunshine! This courtroom is not an appropriate forum to discuss the nature of the government communications. We know McGilden conspired to trade national secrets with our enemies, secrets acquired from Mr. Graydon. Now that the man has admitted to his crimes, we have no need to pursue this matter further. But it's really going to bother me.
Miss Lestrade.
Yeah, my lord?
That which you have seen today here in this courtroom has been extremely disturbing.
Falsifying evidence, intimidation, perjury, the grim catalogue of depravity.
An appalling experience to befall any child.
Come on, it ain't nothing I don't see most days in the back slums.
I beg your pardon.
If you're weak, you pay for it. That's just how life goes. Gina? But look, I reckon I've worked something out today. The world ain't fair, but if you want it to change, you gotta start at some. You gotta start at home. You gotta change how you are yourself.
Well, that's a very laudable lesson, I would say. I eagerly look forward to the born-again Miss Lestrade never gracing my courtroom with her presence again. Now, with regard to the murder of Mr. Park Blvd N Ste, proprietor of a pawnbrokery business on Baker Street, I hereby declare the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade,
not guilty. Woo woo! Do we get our confetti? Woo, we got the confetti. Where does the confetti even come from, though? And fireworks, where does it even come from? That seems like a safety hazard. Aw, she's so happy. Aw, that was cute. Ooh, green. Gina, do it again. That was dope.
That is all. Court is adjourned.
Ooh. What's up, vampire boy? Just me and you now. He has beautiful eyebrows. On a personal note, I must say you've surprised me, my far eastern friend. Oh. Despite being a Nipponese, you saw through the pretense to the malice that festered within that Englishman, and at the same time saw through the grime to the surprising hearts of your English client. You have a curious talent for judging character, especially considering our very different cultures. I don't think there's anything curious about it. Whether we're from the Empire of Great Britain or the Empire of Japan, we're all human beings. We're not so very different on the inside. You know, I took this case for one very simple reason. To lock swords with you once again, here in the courtroom. You did? When I encountered you for the first time 2 months ago, it reminded me of toasting friendship and trust with another Nipponese, only to find my trust betrayed. Through you, I hope to look into the eyes of the man I once knew and try to understand. You mentioned something similar earlier today, about total betrayal at the hands of the Japanese. What happened exactly? Well, you may ask. And one day, when the time comes, you will learn the answer, whether you like it or not. Alright, then I'll wait for that day if I must. Coming to be known as the Reaper of the Bailey, in my retirement from service 5 years ago, gives me cause to wonder if our meeting has some deeper purpose. So, farewell, my learned Nipponese fellow, until we meet again. Oh, is this the cliffhanger? Oh, that's rude! Rude. Alright, 5:24 p.m. This is a full day of courthouse activities. Back to the antechamber. Ooh, we got the celebratory music. It's good stuff, good stuff. It's done. It's over at last. But where has Iris disappeared to? Ah, congratulations, Gina. I knew it all along. I knew that you were innocent. Well, did what you said, Mr. Naruto. You believed in me, right up to the end. You're as odd as your name. What's odd about it? I told you I had faith in you, didn't I? No one ever has before, see? Kept a promise, properly. That's awful. Now I figured something out today. All my life, growing up in the slums, I've never trusted no one. Well, that's just because I've been scared of being stabbed in the back. The more you trust someone, the more it hurts when they let you down. Yes, I think I can understand that. And after all, I had a taste of it in that trial 2 months ago. I chose to trust someone and paid for it. That betrayal left a big scar. You know though, Gina, I worked something out quite recently too. Trusting in someone else is really an exercise in learning to trust yourself. And when your gut tells you it's the right thing to do, and your trust is rewarded, there's no better feeling in the world. I think I have to thank you for reminding me of that valuable lesson. Oh, well, if you say so. Don't make a fat lot of sense to me, though. And I'm trying to say that putting my faith in you, Gina, has been a real pleasure. For crying out loud, pack it in! But I suppose I sort of feel the same way. I mean, sometimes trusting someone else is, you know, alright. Thanks. This is the way I see it, Ryunosuke. A defense lawyer is only as good as his faith in his clients. And that comes down to how much faith he has in himself. After this experience, I'm starting to feel like I understand what you mean. Kazuma, am I living up to your expectations? Am I turning out to be the lawyer you believed I could be?
Pardon the interruption. But what the deuce does a man have to do to be notified around here, my dear fellow?
Ah, that voice!
It's too late for that voice now, Mr. Naruhodo. I've been standing here patiently in the corner of the room for an eternity. Ah, yes, it was me all along. I would have said when you finally noticed me. But you people, with your incessant babbling.
Nah, Mr. Sholmes.
Ah, yes, it was me all along, you see? It was me, Dio.
I'd assumed you'd been taken back to the hospital, to be honest.
Indeed I was, but I managed to escape again.
Oh.
I happened to be aware of one or two foibles of the doctor who was tending to me. I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily issued me with a leave of absence.
How very above board.
But enough of my adventures. That was a fine victory, Mr. Naruhodo. Your tireless efforts justly rewarded, I feel. Congratulations are in order. As a close friend, I tip my hat at you.
Oh, thank you. Some great detective you are. Great at being cold as ice, maybe.
Have I irked you in some way, Miss Lestrade?
While you've been having a snooze in your nice soft bed, some of us have been fighting for our lives.
Now, well, that bullet did cause me to lose substantial amount of blood, it's true. So I have indeed been feeling somewhat cold. Not perhaps cold as ice, but, well, have a feel.
Could you take your hands off my neck, please, Mr. Sholmes?
And in some way, I suppose, congratulations are in order for you too, Miss Lestrade.
What's that supposed to mean? Why so half-hearted?
Well, naturally, it isn't my intention to alarm you, but an acquittal in the trial with that particular prosecutor is perhaps a little precarious.
Well done, Mr. Sholmes. Not alarming in the slightest. Oh, the Reaper, you mean? Because anyone who's found not guilty in the trial he was working on winds up dead anyway. Is it that?
The very point I was trying to make. As exemplified by the fate of Mr. McGilded, in fact. But of course, I pay no attention to such irrational drivel myself.
Yeah, well, it don't bother me.
Oh, really?
Of course not. The way I see it, the Reaper's a bit like I'm upstairs. Him upstairs? You mean, like God? Yeah, him upstairs know what's what, right? You know what people are like on the inside. He won't have got the wrong end of the stick. There are some cows like that bog trotter what are rotten to the core. At the end of the day, him upstairs make sure they get what they deserve. Now, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. Divine justice is one thing, though. The Reaper taking matters into his own hands and claiming lives is another. Well, it ain't like the McGildeds of this world, so I ain't scared. I got principles, see?
The trait in you which is to be admired, Miss Lestrade.
Oi, just give a rest, alright? as I was saying, congratulations are in order. The news of your acquittal was very welcome news to me indeed. Let me express my heartfelt congratulations, Gina.
Well, there you are, Hurley! How long have you been here? Honestly, I went to the main entrance especially to meet you there.
Iris, my dear, I do apologize. But wait until I tell you what happened. This pair made utter fools of themselves.
What happened?
As you should know, I have a penchant for disguise. I was hiding in this room dressed as a bailiff. But these dolts didn't notice my presence at all. They had no idea. Can you imagine, Iris? Would you credit it?
I'm not sure, really.
I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, Hurley, but you just don't have the weighty presence you seem to think you have. In fact, you really ought to be careful about that. It's going to land you in trouble one day.
No, be careful.
Ouch. Anyway, it's such a shame. I was so hoping to throw a party for Ginny tonight, but you won't be able to come, will you?
Don't look like I'm gonna be gone nowhere for a while. You had the judge's patter. I got stuff to make amends for, apparently, all of them offenses. What was it again? Breaking and entering, taking the bog trotter stuff, what was in lug, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I think you'll find that basically being a pickpocket is the main offense. But diving ain't an offense, it's a job, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Still, it has got me thinking all this. Maybe I should start looking for another line of work. I mean, you didn't start off as a lawyer, did you, Odo? Well, no, but I was never a pickpocket. Well, anyway, I reckon I could make a change. I'm gonna do something for all them lot like me from the slums, something that makes a difference for them.
That's a wonderful idea, Ginny, and I'm sure you can do it. What is it?
Well, you know, I never thought I'd have friends. Nothing. It's nothing.
Miss Gina Lestrade! The prison carriage has arrived, ma'am. Come with me to the rear gate at once.
Right. Well, looks like I'm off then. Yes, goodbye, Gina. And good luck. Odo. Yes?
Ah! What was that for?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say, so. Indeed. Perhaps the situation calls for a phrase hitherto missing from your vocabulary, Miss Lestrade.
Eh?
On occasions such as this, I would recommend a simple thank you.
Oh. Oh, yes. It's good advice, Ginny.
Right, I see. Well. Thanks, Otto. Aww. Thank you for everything what you've done, for believing in me. Not at all. In fact, that should be my line. Thank you, Gina. Well, there she goes. I wonder if I'll ever see her again. Well, quite the indomitable pick-purse.
Oh, I nearly forgot. I bought a paper outside. It's a special edition. This trial's all over the front page. Pickpocket's innocence proven. Isn't it wonderful?
You should have shown it to Gina, Iris. She would have been thrilled.
Oh no, how silly of me. But anyway, would you like the good news or the bad news?
Ugh, not again.
Well, what do you say, Rudo? Hurley?
As usual, I think I'd rather get the bad news out of the way first.
Absolutely not! I have no intention of listening to anything but good news!
And there you have it. How people answer that question says a lot about them, doesn't it? Let's not go there. Alright then, maybe let's start with the good news this time. The rain has finally stopped. It was a record level of rainfall, apparently.
Well, that is good news indeed. We can journey back in great comfort.
Alright then, what's the bad news? The huge storm has left the seas very choppy. The channel in particular is awful, so sailings out of Dover have been delayed by a day or more. Wait, Dover? That's right. If we head to the station immediately, we may still be able to make it in time to wave Susie off. But, there won't be a train, surely. We couldn't be that lucky.
Who do you think I am, Mr. Naruhodo?
Mr. Sholmes?
I rushed to Victoria Station earlier and made arrangements for a special express. If we hurry now, we shall be there in time for dinner. And I know of a fine restaurant that serves the most delicious baked sole.
No, I don't. The great detective does it again.
Indeed he does. And I happen to be aware of a number of the rail transport director's foibles.
What?
I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily laid on the locomotive. Elementary.
Just an idea, but it might be wise to stop manipulating people that way. What are we waiting for then? To London, Victoria. Alright, it's 5:32 a.m., Port of Dover, quayside.
That took somewhat longer than I had anticipated.
Susie's boat must be about to leave now. Miss Susanto, where are you? Convenient. Over there, look! Looks like she's reading something.
Hold it!
Miss Susanto, wait! What are you doing?
Mr. Naruhodo, what are you doing here?
We came as soon as we could after the trial. I mean, we heard that sailings were being delayed due to the bad weather, you see.
Oh, I see. Then tell me, how did Gina's trial go?
It went well. She was acquitted.
That's wonderful. Really wonderful news.
The book you're about to throw into the sea. It was your Encyclopedia of British Law, wasn't it?
Oh dear, I was hoping you hadn't seen that. I'm not worthy of practicing law in any way now. So I was saying my final farewell.
You were saying goodbye to law? You, Susanto-san?
Would I be correct in assuming it's because of the peephole, Miss Susanto?
I deliberately altered the scene of a crime, and then I tried to hide the fact. What I did is utterly unforgivable.
That reminds me. How did you even come to have this, Susie?
On the evening of the incident, Mr. Sholmes had invited Gina to dinner, if you remember.
Oh yes, we had a wonderful time.
Well, Gina gave us a little introductory lesson, didn't she? To the art of pickpocketing, I mean.
Oh, that was so much fun. I stole Bruno's armband. Yes, please don't do that again, Iris. That band's very important to me. Well, if it's so important, you should pay more attention to it. You didn't notice for ages.
On a whim, I thought it would be fun to see if I could take the cat flap-o-mat, so I put it up my sleeve.
Really? How'd that fit up there, Susanto?
And then I rather forgot about it until I found myself in Mr. Windibank's shop with it later that night.
I see.
And then... Ah! Mr. Sholmes! Mr. Sholmes!
Leave me, Mr. Naruhodo!
Right.
After Mr. Naruhodo had left the shop, I started to think. That door started to play on my mind.
The storeroom door, you mean?
Yes, if Gina was anywhere in the shop, I realized it could only be behind that door. And at that moment, the little device I had up my sleeve sprang to mind. I was so worried about Gina, I simply had to know.
So you used the cat flap-o-mat to make the peephole in the door. As captured in a photographic print of the shop by one of Hurley's red-handed recorders.
Indeed, it was of the first importance, that point. Precisely when the peephole was made, that information would prove to be Mr. Naruhodo's greatest weapon. Though naturally, without proof, it would have been amounted to nothing.
But when I looked through the hole in the door, the sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. Thoughts started to run through my mind. I remembered that trial 2 months earlier.
The trial of Magnus McGilded.
I thought about how he had manipulated the evidence and arranged false testimony to secure his freedom. I made the British justice system feel very dark and sinister to me. And then, a terrible thought occurred to me. What if some wicked criminal was planning to do the same thing now? Because from the appearance of the crime scene, it looked exactly as though Gina had shot Mr. Windibank. Even though I'm sure she would never have done such a thing.
You were worried that the true culprit would try to frame her for the crime?
That's right, but then I realized it would be very difficult for anyone to give false testimony in this case.
What do you mean?
Well, the crime appeared to have happened behind the door of a locked room. For someone to claim falsely to have witnessed it, there would have to be a way to see beyond the door.
Ah.
For which, a peephole would be the very thing.
Only the peephole I had made wasn't actually there until after the crime had been committed, of course. And the criminal would know that, so it wouldn't make any difference.
But the possibility of a rather ingenious trap was there, was it not?
A trap? Is that why she did it? So is that why you kept it a secret, Susie? You never mentioned that you made the peephole to anyone, not even to the police.
I know. And I knew at the time what I was doing was wrong. A criminal offense, even. That's why I decided to confide in Mr. Sholmes. If Mr. Naruhodo was completely backed into a corner with no other possible means of escape, the truth about the peephole could save him. That was my plan.
She really does think of everything. But then, why didn't you just tell me everything before the trial began?
My dear fellow, you're not thinking straight. If she had done that, it would have rendered you complicit in the whole escapade.
Ah.
You could have been disbarred if you'd been seen to have knowingly tampered with the crime scene. So Miss Susato decided to shoulder the burden of responsibility alone. For your sake, and Miss Lestrade's.
Mrs. Sato.
The truth is, when it happened, I did it because I'd lost a little of my faith in the law.
Oh.
I was worried that the right person wouldn't be convicted of the crime. But the moment I allowed myself to think that is the moment I lost my right to call myself a judicial assistant.
What you did isn't comparable to what he did. Graded is the one who lied in the witness stand, using that peephole as a way to implicate Gina. And besides, if the peephole inconsistency hadn't existed, I'm not at all sure that she would have been acquitted in the end. Miss Susato, what you did saved Gina's life.
Well, with your kind words, Mr. Naruhodo, you've saved me too, from my regrets.
Aw, cute.
Well, we must all be thankful that Miss Lestrade's freedom has been assured.
Yes, exactly. Although some of the loose ends in that trial will continue to play on my mind, I'm sure.
But the revelation that the music box disc contained secret messages, Mr. Naruhodo. What a triumph to work that out! I'm full of admiration.
Well, actually, that argument wasn't quite as compelling as I thought it was.
Oh, it wasn't?
There was a communications officer among the jury members, you see, a telegraph operator, and she said that the majority of the sounds on the disc were just meaningless tones.
As one would expect, after all, we are talking about secret government communications. No doubt they were written in cipher to avoid being readily understood should they have been intercepted.
In cipher, I see. So then, we could never have hoped to understand the message anyway.
Nonsense, my dear fellow. It's quite a zero-pipe problem, I assure you.
Asogi? Oh, someone's reading his armband. Well, that can't be a real word, can it? How funny. Wait, Iris, what did you just say? Oh, I just said asogi. Does that word mean something to you? Mean something? Nasogi was the name of my best friend. What? But how? How do you know that name, Iris? I wrote it down during the trial before, when the message was playing on the music box. She transcribed it on the fly? She really is a genius. I thought the message probably wouldn't be written out in plain Morse code, so I tried various ways to interpret it. But whatever I tried, the words just didn't seem to make any sense. That is, in English at least. Oh! It suddenly occurred to me, you see. There's more than one Morse code, not just the English variety. Various countries around the world have altered and added Morse code to use it in their own languages. I don't believe it, are you saying? That's right. I've only actually seen a chart of Japanese Morse code once before, but I think it's based on the Iroha pentagram. Pentagram, isn't it? And you mean to say that in Japanese Morse code the message says asogi? Yes, I think so. Sorry, but I don't remember all of the Japanese Morse code. Iris, would you let me see that? Mrs. Sato, do you know it? Do you know Japanese Morse code? Yes, I spent some time studying it. Because I'm quite sure Morse code will become ever more important for international communications.
Then might I recommend, my dear madam, that you focus your efforts on the English version.
Be that as it may, Iris, show me the message, please. Of course. But what can this possibly mean? Whatever is in that long sequence of supposedly meaningless dots and dashes, it's made the color drain from Susato-san's face. There's no doubt that this message is written in Japanese Morse code. So the British Empire has been using Japanese for its secret communications? I don't understand the reason why, but the message appears to be a list of 4 people's names. 4 names? The first is Kei Asogi. Kazuma Asogi. Why? Why was his name on that disc? The second is Hei Shin. Shin? I don't recognize that name. The third is T. Gregson. Gregson?
No, it would seem Tobias Gregson is the third man on the list.
And what's his name doing in a secret government communication as well? And the last name? What's the matter, Miss Susato? It's just so strange. So unexpected. Oh, what is it, Susie? Don't keep us in suspense. The last name is J. Wilson. What? Wilson? John H. Wilson? You mean Daddy? It says only J. Wilson, so I'm afraid I can't be sure. Then after the 4 names, it reads, if I translate from Japanese, that is all 4. And that's the end of the message. Or rather, the end of what you noted down, Iris. I just can't believe it. Who would ever have thought that those discs contain Japanese Morse code? Not to mention a strange list of some disturbingly familiar names.
It would appear that this particular message is a communication of some kind between Great Britain and the Empire of Japan.
So Daddy could be in Japan then? Where Susie and Runo come from? Oh, well. No, it's not very likely, really, is it? I mean, there are thousands of people with the surname Wilson, and there must be lots of J's among them. Professor John H. Wilson, visiting professor of medicine at the Imperial Yume University. But we can't tell Iris about that now, we just can't. This is so strange. Somehow, in solving the case of the Mr. Windibank's murder today, I feel like I've rolled back a boulder at the mouth of a very dark cave.
I do wonder if perhaps it's a dark cave we shouldn't go wandering inside.
Uh-oh, Susanto, you better get your butt on that boat.
Oh dear! The ship is gonna set sail soon!
Yes, it seems so.
I'll sail on that steamship first to the port of Dunkirk in France. Then I'll change onto a larger passenger vessel bound for Japan.
You're really going in, Susie?
We wish you a safe passage, Miss Susato.
Thank you so much. I wish all of you the very best.
Miss Susato, I had hoped to have you always at my side, to guide me and support me.
Mr. Naruhodo,
Please, come back soon. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you really are the very best judicial assistant in the world.
I'm quite sure I'll be back before you know it.
Really, Susie?
Oh, now don't forget, Iris. I made you a promise I've yet to fulfill.
A promise?
How about your manuscript?
Ah. Oh yes, the Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, I'll be waiting for you then, Susie. A promise is a promise.
Definitely, Iris. Mr. Naruhodo,
Yes?
do you remember the first time we met?
Yes, of course. On the SS Buria when I was dragged out from that wardrobe, still half asleep. If I remember rightly, you threw me halfway across the cabin with a Susanto takedown.
You know very well that I'm talking about after that. It's strange, but being thrown together as we were in that case, I somehow felt straight away that you were the perfect person to continue Kazuma-sama's great legacy.
Miss Susanto.
And my instincts were right. I really want to believe. No, I'm sure that I'll be back soon. Farewell until then.
Bye, Susanto. Come back soon, Susanto. Ooh, anime time.
Somehow we seem to have come to the end of the adventures of Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Or the first volume, at least. Looking back now, it feels as though fate has led me on this journey.
They brought Wagai.
Fate led me to becoming a lawyer, to traveling halfway around the world, to meeting the great detective. I'm sure there'll be trials and tribulations ahead. Of course there will. But whatever happens, I know I'll be able to turn my fortunes around. After all, I have the greatest friends in the world on my side.
Ah, yes, Mr. Naruhodo.
Yes, Mr. Sholmes?
I have some rather awkward news. The railway company has decided to sue over the special express train, apparently.
Huh? It caused such a commotion on the line. All the other trains had to wait at the stations.
But really, we would never have made it to Dover in time otherwise. Anyway, I explained everything and how it was all your fault.
What? Huh?
I believe a formal complaint should be delivered to your office tomorrow. But not to worry, my dear fellow. According to Miss Susato,
You love defending yourself in court. Huh? It's alright, I'm perfectly happy to testify. He really didn't look like the sort of man who'd do something so outrageous. See? Mr. Sholmes? Yes? Yes? A word, if you don't mind.
Why, certainly, any word you like. Bellow it out, my dear fellow.
Oh yes, I love Reno's words, and I just know just the one he'll use here. Then, I really must say...
Objection!
Wow, I can't believe that was it there. Man, definitely some shenanigans there. Of course, we figured it out that it had to be Egbert Benedict / Ashley there.
In the following weeks, hundreds of music boxes arrived at Baker Street from all over Europe. Something was afoot. Though it transpired I had ordered them all myself. So I advertised them for sale with used by Mr. Sholmes to solve an important case. And the money I earned, consulting detective work pays a pittance by comparison.
Hopefully, Sholmes will use that to pay off the... whatever we got sued for. Because of you commandeering that train. Oh, I haven't slept a wink. This manuscript is due tomorrow now. When I'm this busy, Hurley usually cooks me breakfast. Well, cooks is an overstatement for some dry toast and insipid coffee. I do miss Susie and her lovely Japanese breakfasts.
Witness, your testimony is riddled with contradictions.
I don't remember these voices. Oh, about the stake and the coin. Are you calling my son a liar?
Witnesses, the courtroom is no place for your petty arguments.
Yes, the nasal judge. Ah, so the theft case being heard in Japanese courts. Having delivered the Russian dancer to shore in Shanghai, I laid low on the steamship for a while. But last night, I apprehended an extremely suspicious Japanese national on board. I've done nothing wrong! All I did was give Wagahai's offspring refuge in my pocket! A man brings some kittens on board and suddenly he's a hardened criminal! It's not fair! This man's just smuggling cats. Wagahai's offspring! Scientific investigation will be the gold standard for policing in the new age. I dream of a world governed by the tenets of order and discipline. You're still shady AF. Don't talk to me like a great clock, in fact, whose hunt I missed that part. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have but 2 minutes and 37 seconds until my next appointment. I don't trust you. I don't trust you at all. Not trustworthy. The latest Rants magazine is out, and I'm in it again. Whenever I say that one line she wrote now, I get a standing ovation. Want to hear it? Not bad, I suppose, for an amateur. Her ladyship puts me to shame. Been visiting the old girl on a daily basis, of course. Joni, my old jailbird. Must say, battling with those belly stairs every day has done wonders for the dicky peg. Managing rather well with the housework, too. Got this maid business taped up, I say. Hope the gossiping neighbors don't realize the man of the house is his own maid. Mr. Lunatone. Yeah, because Mrs. Garrideb went to prison for accidental murder. Well, accidental attempted murder.
My Raleigh is back on the beat again? All thanks to the Reaper.
There's nothing I enjoy more than these days out hunting small change in the gutter. I'm a better Bobby now, looking out for Londoners. They're dropping the pennies. My lovely wife.
Oh my god, Raleigh?
Oh, Pat.
Oh, Raleigh?
Oh yeah, I totally missed Missed you guys. I was totally really looking forward to learning what happened to you two post-game. Totally. Looks like I'm gonna be doing time for a bit now. But Iris comes every day for a natter, so it ain't too boring. She's always going on about all them cases what Jones is looking into. Criminal investigations are kinda interesting when you get into them. Yes, I renounced my upbringing and chose a life of sophisticated crime. But regrets? Please. I have no regrets. Give over, bruv. That ain't the Ash we used to know. We got in here to plan a comeback at Milverton and Skulkin's Milk Run, right? The Three Muskewatsits? Milk in the neighborhood for all it's worth. Oh my goodness, look at these fools.
This past 6 months has been a time I shall remember forevermore. Painful goodbyes and wonderful encounters. I've come to realize that's what life is all about. Naruhodo-san, I promise. Your system will return to you one day. But for now, I leave you with many memories and a heartfelt wish that life will treat you well.
A little dramatic, but okay, Susanto. Aww, that's cute. Look at Wide Eye. Alright, so that does wrap up here Game 1 in the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles with the Great Ace Attorney Adventures. So that was a pretty big cliffhanger at the end. Not only do we have to figure out what is going on in Van Zeek's past between him and another Japanese person, total and utter betrayal, but also why is the government using Japanese Morse Code, and why does it feel like to me they have a hit list? Dr. Wilson's dead, Cosmo's dead, and the other two names that we don't know, definitely very, very odd. So I guess we'll find out more about that in the next episode here, but I like this little history of what we've been through in the game, and I like the little models walking as well. Get to see some more Cosmo, always nice. Like seeing the side profiles too. Got some nice boots. Nice boots. But yeah, definitely big reveal there that Ashley was a government spy and was selling the secrets to Mr. McGilded. Now, what McGilded was doing with them, that's, I feel, a different question that we didn't get an answer to. Why does he need these government secrets? I guess he's selling them to other people? Definitely a lot of questions I have. Not as many things that I don't have answers to as I thought we would potentially get here. I wasn't sure the scale of the cliffhanger. I've heard it was massive. I mean, I feel like it just really gets us excited for the next game. I feel like we got everything wrapped up as best as it could be. Yes, we don't know why McGilded was dealing in the government secrets. Like, what use did he have for that? I don't know. I guess just to make himself more rich. I mean, where does all his money come from? Probably selling the information to other nations, but still have a question about that. But in general, very glad we were able to seal up that trial. You know, Gina, of course, has to do some time for the perjury, for theft, all different kinds of stuff. But hopefully she'll be out. We'll see her again in the next game. It's nice always touching back up on the characters throughout the game at the end. So that was cute, even though I was like joking, you know, I'm like, oh, we totally cared about Patricia and Rolly, but it's nice seeing what everybody was up to. I like these little little background things going on. This is also pretty cool to look at. But yeah, we're just sitting here through the credits. Lord Strongheart, I don't trust him. That is, I guess, another line we didn't really wrap up. I feel like he's very suspicious. Perhaps we just got bad vibes from him. He does look quite intimidating. Maybe he's a good guy, but I don't know if I trust it. I don't know if I trust it. You know, for a guy that makes hats, his hat doesn't fit very well. And Beppo's still cold. Somebody give Beppo a blanket. Oh, we lost Kazuma. When that happened, I was too busy looking at the background. Susato's here now. Maybe they switched off. The Gilded is literally the penguin. He's even wearing purple. This is cute, though, the little walking. But yeah, I had a blast here with this game, and I will be taking off Sunday. So one episode got uploaded. Yeah, episode 19 on Friday. Episode 20 here is on Saturday. So I am taking off Sunday. If I decide to take off Monday as well, I'll let you guys know. I'm hoping, actually, on Friday night to go ahead and get into episode 1 of The Great Ace Attorney 2. But we'll have to see how that goes, of course, with my schedule and everything like that. Aiming to get started back up here on Monday, but if anything changes, I'll let you guys know in the community tab. But definitely a lot of crazy twists and turns this game. I love that we just have Wagahai now. Hopefully we see more of him. It's cute, little cutie, little cute cat. We've acquired Sholmes on our walk. Are we going to acquire Iris as well? Iris, you want to join us? Iris, we're going for a walk. You want to come? Iris is coming with us. Welcome, Iris. Who's letting a 10-year-old wear heels? This is a nice outfit. Hello there, vampire. What's up? They do all pose. I guess it makes sense that they all know each other, because they got... I wonder if that's their big bruv that they lost. He's returned to him now. Hey, Gina, what's up? What? Gina, when you come on a walk? What? A walk? Come with us, Gina. Gina's like, no, I'm gonna shoot you. Gina, come with us. Ah, Gina didn't want to come with us. Yeah, I feel like I don't really have any other words. I feel like I've given my thoughts throughout this episode. But I definitely really enjoyed this game, and I'm excited to get on into the next one. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, I know it was super long. I honestly didn't anticipate it being nearly 3 hours and 20 minutes. But if you guys enjoyed it, don't forget to go on ahead and hit that like button. Comments from me, thoughts on the game, thoughts on the results of this case, thoughts on what we'll learn in the future, let me know down below in the comment section. And of course, if you're not yet part of the Allie's Treasure Trove family, I'd love to have you join us. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Alright, so wrapped up the Great Ace Attorney Adventures there. Alright, do I have to save or anything here? Ooh, look at that picture. Ooh, Fleeting Farewell, achievement unlocked. That was a nice picture. Alright, we're back to the title screen here. Press any key. No. Now, I know I haven't shown this screen before, but this is when you first open up the game. It's actually changed case by case with a relevant background, whether it's a new scene or like once we got to the jail for the first time, the background was the jail. We got to the Old Bailey for the first time, the background was the Old Bailey between the parts. So I like that. That's pretty cool, little bonus feature. But yes, definitely enjoyed this first game here of the Chronicles, and we'll be getting into Game 2 next week. Now, I already did my like and subscribe stuff that I have to do at the end of every video, but I haven't yet given a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much, you all, for your above and beyond continued support. I really, truly do appreciate it. We do have 3 Ultimate Excavators, Jack Prez, Keith Muta, and Stephen Olivo, 3 Gemstone Miners, Andin, Mark Mardini, and Stephen Bly, and 1 Crystal Collector of John Michek. But thank you so much to all of my patrons, whether you're on a tier in which I say your name at the end of every video or not. Really, truly do appreciate your above and beyond support. But yes, that does it here for this episode. I had a blast, so I hope you did all as well. And I hope you guys are very excited for the next part here. Getting into the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles 2, like I said, starting next week. So let me know your excitement for that in the comment section down below. But that is it for me here today. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll join me next time here as we get into some more mysteries on Allie's Treasure Trove. Take care, everybody, and hope to catch you in the next episode. Bye!